Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by EcoWine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, EcoWine.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Rebooting the American Dream, 11 Ways to Rebuild Our Country, Chapter 4, An Informed and Educated Electorate. It opens with a quote from Thomas Jefferson. If a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. Whenever the people are well informed, they can be trusted with their own government. That, whenever things get so far wrong as to attract their notice, they may be relied upon to set them right. Talk Media News Service, based here in Washington, D.C., is owned and run by my dear friend Ellen Ratner. Ellen is an experienced and accomplished journalist, and a large number of interns and young journalism school graduates get their feet wet in reporting by working with and for her. In March of 2010, I was in Washington for a meeting with a group of senators, and I needed a studio from which to do my radio and TV show. Ellen was gracious enough to offer me hers. I arrived as three of her interns were producing a panel discussion type of TV show for web distribution at talkmedianews.com, in which they were discussing their viewing audience, their recent experiences on Capitol Hill. One intern panelist related that a White House correspondent for one of the big three networks had told her that the network registered a huge amount of interest in a hot story that week of a congressman's sexual indiscretions. Far less popular were stories about the debates on health care, the conflicts in the Middle East, and even the Americans who had recently died in Iraq or Afghanistan. Quote, so that's the story they have to run with on the news, end quote, the intern said, relating the substance of the network correspondent's thoughts, because that's what the American people want to see. If the network doesn't give people what they want to see, viewers will tune away. The network won't get any ratings or revenues or viewers. The other two interns commiserated with the first about what a shame it was that Americans wanted the titillating stories instead of the substantive ones, but they accepted without question that the network was therefore obligated to give people what they want. When they finished their panel discussion, I asked these college students if they knew that there was a time in America when radio and television stations and networks broadcast the actual news instead of infotainment because the law required them to. None of them had any idea what I was talking about. They were mystified. Why would a station or network broadcast programs that were not popular or not what people wanted? But the reality is that from the 1920s, when radio really started to go big in the United States, until Reagan rolled it back in 1987, federal communications law required a certain amount of public service programming from radio and television stations as a condition of retaining their broadcast licenses. The agreement was basic and simple. In exchange for the media owners being granted an exclusive license from the Federal Communications Commission to use the airwaves owned by the public, they had to serve the public interest first. And only then could they go about the business of making money with the rest of their programming throughout the day. If they didn't do so, if they didn't serve the public interest, when it came time to renew their license, public groups and individuals could show up at a public hearing on the license renewal and argue for the license being denied. One small way the stations lived up to their public service mandate was by airing public service announcements, PSAs, for local nonprofit groups and community events and charitable causes. But they also had to abide by something called the Fairness Doctrine, which required them to air diverse points of view on controversial issues. Separately, during election campaigns, broadcasters had to abide by the equal time rule, which required them to provide equal airtime to rival candidates during an election. But the biggest way they proved that they were providing a public service and meeting the requirements of the Fairness Doctrine was by broadcasting the news, real news, actual news, local, national, and international news produced by professional old-school journalists. Because the news didn't draw huge ratings like entertainment shows, although tens of millions of Americans did watch it every night on TV and listen to it at the top of the hour on radio from coast to coast. And because real news is expensive to produce with bureaus and correspondents all over the world, news was a money loser for the big three TV networks and for most local and radio and TV stations. But it was such a sacred thing. That is, after all, the keystone It was, after all, the keystone that held together the station's license to broadcast and thus to do business. It didn't matter if the news lost money. It made all the other money-making things possible. Through much of the early 1970s, I worked in the newsroom of a radio station in Lansing, Michigan. It had been started and was then run by 3 local guys, an engineer, a salesman, and a radio broadcaster. They split up the responsibilities like you would expect, and all were around the building most days and would hang out from time to time with the on-air crew, all except the sales guy. I was forbidden from talking with him because I worked in news. There could be no hint, ever, anywhere, that our radio station had violated the FCC's programming in the public interest mandate by, for example, by going easy on an advertiser in a news story or promoting another advertiser in a different story. News had to be news, separate from profit and revenue, and if it wasn't, I'd be fired on the spot. News, in other words, was not part of the free market. It was part of our nation's intellectual commons and thus the price of the station's license. After Reagan blew up the fairness doctrine in 1987, 2 very interesting things happened. The first was the rise of right-wing hate speech talk radio, starting with Rush Limbaugh that very year. The second, which really stepped up fast after President Clinton signed the Telecommunications Act of 1996, which further deregulated the broadcast industry, was that the money-losing news divisions of the big 3 TV networks were taken out of the wings of their entertainment divisions and wrung dry. Foreign bureaus were closed, reporters were fired, stories that promoted the wonders of advertisers or other countries like big movie production houses owned by the same mega corporations that own the networks began to appear, and investigative journalism that cast a bright light on corporate malfeasance vanished. So the chapter is An Informed and Educated Electorate. It's about our media in rebooting the American dream.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It always helps when you can't hear me. Sorry about that. I'm now plugged in. Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you, and I am just so super excited to have in the studio with us Michael Eric Dyson. He's got a new book out, Tears We Cannot Stop. He, of course, is the professor of sociology at Georgetown University, an ordained minister for 35 years, contributing opinion writer to the New York Times, author of 17 books. And you can tweet him at Michael E. Dyson, D-Y-S-O-N, and not a website, right?
Well, MichaelEricDyson.com.
MichaelEricDyson.com. Cool, great. So, Dr. Dyson, so pleased to have you with us.
Dr. Hartmann, always great to see you, and I'm a fan of yours, and it's great to be on this radio.
Thank you. Back at you. This book moved me. This book provoked me, and the book is Tears We Cannot Stop, a sermon to white America. Let's start out with why a sermon and why to white America.
Yes, sir. Well, I was trying to write this book as an analysis, and I've done over the last, 19 books I've written, cultural criticism, engaged reflection, but it just wouldn't come. So I went to bed one night frustrated. My editor is mad at me, and I'm mad at myself, and I'm mad at her, and we're fighting and going back and forth. You know how it is.
Yeah. Been there.
I know you do.
All these books.
Yeah. I know you know the deal. So, and then one night it came to me. I was frustrated. I'm in bed, and it's go back to what you know. You're a preacher. Just preach a sermon. Just come from your heart. Tell the truth about what you think. I mean, still be cerebral, still be intellectual, but allow the passions and emotions that have occupied your heart over these last few years about this particular issue of race come to the fore. And that's what I did, and it flowed out. And I wanted to preach a sermon to white America because I wanted to engage white brothers and sisters around this extremely important issue of race. But I didn't seem to reach them as much through other fora, through other means, through other genres. So I thought a sermon is something that they might be familiar with, many of them, engaging in, even if you're not a Christian, because it's not just a Christian sermon. It's a kind of metaphor and a symbol for pleading from my heart on the basis of my emotional investment and my intellectual reflection about the issues that are important to us as Americans. And I want to forge a link and connection between me and my listener. So I said, let me just preach a sermon to white America, because usually when we talk about race, we're thinking about black or brown or red or yellow people. We don't think about white people. And white people are not encouraged often to think about race in regards to them. They don't have to think about it in a certain way or in the same way, not obsessed with it, not riveted by it. So I wanted to invite them into a conversation, and I thought a sermon to them was the best means to do that.
Yeah, I'd like to read a couple of little pieces out of here and to kind of set up a riff on your part. You write, this is on page 86, one of the great privileges of whiteness is not to see color, not to see race, and not to pay a price for ignoring it, except, of course, when you're called on it. But even then, the price pales quite literally in comparison to the high price black folk pay for being black. We pay a price, too, for not even being able to derive recognition and financial reward for the styles that make the world want to be black so bad that they don't mind looking at us so long as they never, ever have to be us. There's like actually about 3 layers of stuff in that one paragraph.
Yeah, no doubt.
So let's start with the great privilege of whiteness not seen. We were talking last night on the TV show, and I pointed out that growing up, I never thought about race, frankly, other than as, another thing that was on television. Grew up in a white suburb in southern Lansing, Michigan. My dad worked as a tool and die worker. So
right.
Everybody around me worked at Oldsmobile. And it was not until, my teenage years that I started encountering people of color and who were always talking about race. And I'm like, why are they always talking about race?
Right.
And it wasn't until my 40s or 50s that I realized that was the most powerful piece of white privilege, that I didn't have to wake up in the morning and think, oh my God, I'm a white person. How's that going to influence my day?
Yeah. No, that's a very honest and very powerful reflection on your part. And I think it's true. A lot of white brothers and sisters are not asked to, cajoled to, forced to, or even, invited to think about race. It's not part and parcel of your existence in the same way. Your livelihood may not depend upon it in the same way. And your survival is not dependent upon you negotiating the contradictions of race. And especially for black people, it becomes critical to the vocabulary of our existence, the grammar of our very being, the definition of who we are as people, because so much comes at us. Before we get up and brush our teeth in the morning, Fox News has lambasted us from 10 different angles, just to use one example of one outlet, about issues of race that come at us relentlessly. Poor black people do this. Black people, looking for handouts, or the black president is still X, Y, and Z, on and on and on. And as a result of that, I think many white Americans think, well, black people are obsessed with race. You're the ones who are keeping it alive, right? We want to get beyond race. We don't even want to talk race. So what converges there is amnesia and ignorance, literally ignoring race on the one hand, and the claim that black people are only obsessed with race, and as a result of that, get blamed for its origins. And that's a paradox that is quite perilous and hurtful. And we try to say to many white brothers and sisters, no, it's not that we're obsessed with race because we think it's a good thing to be obsessed with race. We're obsessed with it because our lives depend on it. Our children are killed in disproportionate numbers on the streets of America when they're unarmed by police. Our children are expelled in disproportionate numbers from schools. They are seen and racially profiled, as we are, in retail outlets, and on and on and on. So I think in one way, the old Peggy McIntosh, white privilege and asking white people to unpack the knapsack of their privilege is something that's relevant here. And what I'm trying to do is update that, so to speak, by saying, look, one of the things it means to be white is never have to worry about it, never have to be concerned about it. Men don't often think of gender in the way that women do. They're not forced to think about gender in the way that women do. Women's lives are at stake. Rape is a real possibility for women, far more, importantly than men. And so when you're not part of a group that is forced forever to have to consider the consequences of your being and your behavior and your identity and the kind of resentment that it engenders, you're relatively blissfully, blithely indifferent to what goes on among other people.
So what you're describing, in my mind, to kind of interpret, is white supremacy. Is a culture built on white supremacy, is a government built on white supremacy, is an economic and social structure built, and not just white supremacy, white male supremacy.
Yeah, right.
Because, again, as a white man, like you say, I don't, walk down the street worrying about, is that woman going to rape me?
Right.
Whereas there are women walking down the street wondering why this guy is looking at him that way.
Of course.
And so here you've got white men at the top of this pyramid that arguably they established when they first invaded this continent, or we can take this back 7,000 years if you want, but it's been around for a long time.
Right.
And it's like, how do you disrupt that?
Yeah.
How do you, particularly when probably 80-90% of white males don't realize the reality of this pyramidal power structure that they're at the apex of. And many of them would argue that they're not. Hey, I'm just a poor coal miner in West Virginia who lost his job,
Yeah, right.
And they don't realize that even at that, they've got enormous privilege.
Yeah.
And, I get white people calling in going, well, you got a black president, you got equal opportunity, you got the civil rights laws, you got blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it's not enough. What does it take? How do we get there?
Well, for people like you saying what you just said, I'm very serious. If we had more engaged, enlightened white brothers and sisters like you, speaking up, speaking out, engaging white people, engendering controversy to be certain, as a result of your awareness, making them uncomfortable, moving the needle, pushing the rock like a racial myth, like a Sisyphus up the hill, knowing that it's going to come back down. But you got to keep going at it. You got to keep repeating it. You got to keep stating it. I'm a teacher, and repetition is our, trademark. You got to keep saying it and saying it again. You got to keep preaching it and preaching it again. And it's important to talk about that, to disrupt the narrative of what's going on. I happen to think that the presidency of Donald Trump provides a keen opportunity for us to be able to engage this. Why? Because Donald Trump is literally the face of white innocence. Donald Trump is the face of white privilege that has no awareness. And many white people for the first time might go, oh, if that's what it looks like,
right?
Then maybe I get it.
We got to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Michael Eric Dyson.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Michael Eric Dyson's new book, Tears We Cannot Stop. If you do not have a copy, buy one now. We'll be back. And welcome back. And in the studio with us is Michael Eric Dyson. By the way, he's with us for the hour. So, Chris, if you want to put the phone number up, if those of you watching Free Speech TV or listening on Pacifica stations around the country, or on YouTube or following us on the internet, want to call, we'll be rejoining our commercial stations in just a minute. And give us a shout. And if you have any questions for Michael Eric Dyson, what in your mind, sir, is the most consequential thing that you're saying in this book?
It's a great point. What I'm trying to say, I think that's most consequentially, is that many white Americans are not asked to think about themselves as possessing a race. And if they were to become conscious of it, it could change our lives. And what I mean by that is that, in the same way that men are not taught that we possess a gender, that gender is something women do, and that's something they're obsessed with. No, we have a masculinity. It's often toxic. And if we were more conscious of it, we'd be aware of the ways in which we punish women or ask them to get into deleterious, into very complicated and sometimes vulnerable situations. And we would be more aware of what we do to little girls and how we ask them to participate or not in a rape culture that we normalize. So when you think about all that stuff, to ask white people to become more conscious is to give up what James Baldwin called innocence. And when white people give up innocence, and what I mean by innocence is not having to know, being unaware of the consequences of race, and that possessing whiteness has privileges, it has opportunities, it has desires, it has vengeances, and it has resentments. And if they're conscious of it, they can at least come to grips with it, and we could all have a better society that's more transparent.
And to the best of my knowledge, nobody has ever said, and having whiteness carries responsibility.
Right. That's a great point.
And this is one of the lessons that, we're starting to teach our young men, our boys, is being male has responsibility.
That's
now,
right.
Now that the whole rape culture thing has been exposed.
That's right.
But nobody's saying having whiteness, particularly male whiteness,
that's right,
carries responsibility.
That's a great parallel.
How do we frame that?
Well, by saying it, first of all, and then people kick back and they push back and they get mad and angry. But we say, think about it. Think about the unconscious privileges that you are heir to. Think about, and as you said earlier, some people might say, hey, I'm poor, I'm a white guy. What do I have that's in the way of power? And I get that. It's extremely difficult to be a poor white person in this nation. We got the Hillbilly Elegy. We got Poor White Trash by Nancy Eisenberg, a lot of books. But then you got books that are dedicated even to excavating your experience. They're not similar ones about black poor people and defending them. There's a lot of assault on them. There's a lot of sociological analysis that undercuts their legitimacy or challenges their virtues, but not much to explain and love and embrace them. But even beyond that, one of the greatest privileges as a white person that exists is the ability to encounter a law enforcement personnel and not die. To be on the street and a policeman stops you and not end up dying. Now, I'm not suggesting that there are no white people who die at the hands of police. That's not true. But the disproportionate numbers of people of color who do so suggests to us that something is amiss, something is wrong. And that privilege of whiteness, the presumption that you're human, the presumption that you're not out to hurt me as a police person, the presumption that you will not try to in any way deprive me of life, and therefore I don't have to pull a gun on you in advance of you doing anything to protect myself. To go into a store and not be hounded and harassed by the belief that you can't afford anything that you're in the store to buy. To go to school and not assume that you're there because you were given a handout and you don't really have the same intellectual capacity I have. On and on and on. Not understanding, A, you could be a mediocre white person and doing very well in a school that allowed you to come in and participate, and you don't have no consciousness of that.
Be right back. Thom Hartmann here with the Thom Hartmann Program. Let's talk about blood flow for a moment. We all know that.
Sadness and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here
on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here
on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you
24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
I've been here with you. We're speaking with Michael Eric Dyson, Professor Michael Eric Dyson, a professor of sociology at Georgetown, ordained minister, author of 17 books, writer for the New York Times and others. His most recent book is absolutely astonishingly brilliant. You have to read this. Tears We Cannot Stop, A Sermon to White America. And we will be taking your calls for the second half hour of this first hour of our program today. If you want to argue this issue, please call.
Please.
If you have experiences you wanted to share, whatever it may be, we're talking race here for an hour. Professor Dyson, you mentioned just a minute ago we were talking, and you mentioned one of the great privileges of whiteness is knowing that if a police officer pulls you over, he doesn't automatically assume that you're going to try and harm him, and therefore he's not going to kill you.
Right.
And one of the things that I don't know quite what to make of, but I think I'm getting a handle on it, is the phenomena of black police officers killing black people the same way white police officers are. It looks like, I mean, some of the statistics I've seen seem to indicate that the percentage of black people on police forces is not that different from the percentage of black people who are shot by black officers.
Right.
This is not about whiteness. Well, it is because they're not white people that they're shooting at.
Right.
But at the individual level, I mean, something happens to people when they get power. I was talking to Professor Jack Forbes, a Native American, professor of Native American Studies at UC Davis. This was 20 years ago for a book I was writing, Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. And he said, and he was talking about the American invasion of North America, or the European invasion of North America. And he said, I don't know what's with you white people. He said, every culture you encounter, you destroy. It's like there is something extraordinarily toxic about the power that you guys carry around. And I put that in my book, and it's been like this, and that was 20 years ago, and there's been this kind of question in my brain is, what the hell is going on with this? And is it something that is built into culture? Because it almost looks like some of these police officers are acquiring this power and kind of construing it as the same thing as the power that comes along with whiteness, or am I completely way off on this?
It's a brilliant point, and it's a complicated point. Look, on the one hand, there's the thin blue line, and that blue is the most ultimately important color, not white or black, but blue. And if you're part of the police force, that kind of bunker mentality, us against the world. So you can see that. But then again, you know, when I go speak, I spoke for the black police officers in Dallas about 6-7 months before that horrible tragedy that besieged their communities when the sniper was killing police officers. And when I spoke to those police officers, and I talked about how the fact is that they are some of the first recipients of the racism of the police department themselves. And they, too, a man and woman came to me and said, "Oh, my God, you're so right."
How so?
Well, because they get called nigger. They get called horrible things by their fellow police officers. They don't get promoted.
The black officers.
The black officers by the white police officers. They're the guinea pigs.
Oh, yeah.
And so here's the point. If you're a black police officer and you know what your fellow white police officer is doing, don't be surprised when they turn it against us. And we don't have guns or badges or the legitimacy of the state. When you saw 9/11 and that horrible day that will live forever in infamy, well, why is it that a disproportionate number of the police officers and firemen who died were white? Because there is a racial segregation going on to this day. Yes, there have been efforts made, but that's still a white man's game in a large measure. So the reality is that the fellow police officers who were black, and a recent study came out, it was in the New York Times maybe within a month, that talked about there's a widely divergent worldview between white and black officers. Black officers come up in many ways and don't assume that these people are there to harm or hurt them. They look like their cousins and uncles, and they know them more familiarly than do white officers who live outside the city or who are not black themselves. So even though you have implicit bias that all of us are subject to, all of us, black, white, brown, red, or yellow, might think that black people or brown people are somehow suspicious and we're skeptical of them, even if we're black, and we're ashamed of the fact that we also respond in ways of, "Oh my God, I'm fearful," or "What's going to happen now?" Because if black people watch more television than anybody else, we will internalize some of the stereotypes that are pervaded there in ways that others do as well. So why are we surprised by the fact that we internalize some of the same white supremacist, unconscious, implicit biases that demonize and stigmatize the broader world around black people as white people themselves? So yeah, it's a complicated reality, but at the end of the day, I think that what we have to do is to become conscious of it, to mark those implicit biases, to try to guard against them as much as possible, and to be honest about the unconscious reflexes psychologically that come to bear when we're engaging in confronting another life. Because I tell you what, it can have lethal consequences. It's not the difference between, "Oh, I arrested you more gruffly than I arrested the white guy." It's that I shot you. It's that I felt that I was under attack. It's that you look like a threat to me. So many of these white police who say that you are a threat to me are not just lying. They really believe that the black person is a threat.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back with your calls for Professor Michael Eric Dyson right after this. There is a new television ad buy going on. Daniel Marins, M-A-R-N-S, is reporting about this over at the Huffington Post. He writes, television viewers across the country have been treated to some scary advertisements about the future of Social Security. A narrator in tones with ominous music playing in the background. Our next president needs to take action on Social Security or future generations could lose up to $10,000 a year. So why all this Social Security hysteria? You know, there's these groups like Pete Peterson, who's a Wall Street billionaire, and his foundation and his political action groups, and there's others as well. There's a bunch of Wall Street billionaires who really want Social Security to be privatized. Now, I can't speak to Pete Peterson's specific motivation, but the broadly accepted theory of why these guys care is, number one, that Social Security is like, you know, it's $1 trillion a year.
or thereabouts. It's an enormous amount of money. And if that money, I mean, it's flowing through the federal government and it's not sticking to anybody's fingers. Whereas if that money flowed through Wall Street, can you imagine how much money Jamie Dimon could make off that? Can you imagine how much money each of the big banksters could make off that? These guys would end up like Stephen J. Hemsley, you know, the CEO of United Healthcare, a billionaire. Because Congress drilled holes in Medicare. You know, I've been noticing on TV, United Healthcare runs these ads, you know, for their Medicare supplement programs or their Medicare Advantage, which takes you off the Medicare roll and puts you in, you know, largely at the tender mercies of United Healthcare. And they say, you know, we've been doing this for 30 years. Medicare's been out there for 50 years. So what happened? Well, some Republicans drilled some holes in Medicare, which provided a multi-billion-dollar industry and a multi-billion-dollar opportunity to health insurance companies and to AARP, which basically is a health insurance sales organization, a Medicare insurance sales organization. This is where AARP makes a lot of their money. And you walk by their headquarters here in Washington, D.C., and it's like a palace. And they sell lots and lots and lots of Medicare supplement insurance to people over 65 who qualify for it. And most of it is underwritten by United Healthcare. It's a really, really profitable scam or program or whatever you want to call it. So if they can get Republicans to do the same thing with Social Security, let's drill some holes in Social Security. Well, Social Security doesn't pay quite this, but you can buy insurance for Social Security. So if you start when you're 20 years old and start sending $10, you know, it would be like basically do-it-yourself annuities, right? Because Social Security is like an annuity. You pay into it throughout your life, and then you get the money back after you stop working. And an annuity is a guarantee or a pension. You know, the pensions are kind of the same thing, only they're paid for by your employers. And you contribute money to your pension as well, depending on how it's set up. But instead of going through the insurance companies, because it's not health insurance, it would go through the banks. Well, actually, it could go through insurance companies too. It just wouldn't be United Healthcare and Aetna and Blue Cross Blue Shield. Instead, it would be, you know, Farmers or, you know, whatever. I don't know, frankly, who provides annuities. But there would be a huge opportunity if they could drill some holes into Social Security, if they could cut Social Security. A huge opportunity, a brand new market opening up for AARP to sell you a supplemental program for your Social Security. The ad, writes Daniel Marins, the headline is, Nation's largest senior group is using conservative scare tactics on Social Security. And then the subhead, AARP is promoting alarmism about the program and giving awards to Republican lawmakers who want to cut it. And Daniel Marins notes in his article for the Huffington Post, the headline of which I just read you, the new television ad has only heightened liberal concerns. Critics of AARP's approach say the influential seniors group, which has 37 million members across the country and incredible influence in Washington, D.C., is making Social Security's financial challenges seem much more dire than they really are. In doing so, the group is playing right into the crisis framing favored by conservatives who want benefit cuts to seem inevitable. Oh, you young folks, you're never going to see Social Security. You should just go along with us and cut it. And then you'll never see it. What a nice self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Not that AARP is saying that, but it seems like actually in a way that they're saying that. Don't buy the hype. Right now, if you make over $118,500 a year, you no longer pay any Social Security taxes, which is crazy.
Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and so pleased to have in the studio with us Michael Eric Dyson, the author of a brilliant new book, Tears We Cannot Stop, A Sermon to White America. And should we pick up some phone calls?
Let's do that,
Every single line is full here.
All right, good deal.
Michael in Imperial Beach, California. You are on the air with me and Michael Eric Dyson.
Hey, Tom and Professor Dyson. Tom, you just stole my thunder. Professor Dyson, how do white people, and I'm white, how do white people justify the Holocaust of Native Americans who are people just like myself? How does a white person just turn their heads and watch Standing Rock happen? Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, God bless you, man. I mean, this is the kind of self-consciousness we have to encourage in ourselves, just to think as a culture what we've done, as a community what we've done, as a nation how we've been complicit in the destruction of human beings, of human communities, of taking for granted the ability to have the sacred spaces of our culture protected. If somebody wanted to destroy one of our sanctuaries or kill one of our churches or undermine one of our synagogues or tear down one of our temples, we would find it abhorrent. And yet we routinely tear down, stand ground on Native peoples, indigenous peoples, First Nation peoples, and don't realize the degree to which all of us have benefited from the horrible, misdeeds done in the name of America against them. So I think all of us have to become more conscious, become more aware, know our history. Isn't it interesting? When it comes to American history, if it's about Lincoln or if it's about Thomas Jefferson or Benjamin Franklin, we are ravenous. We can't get enough of that history.
Dead white guys.
I mean, hey, 100 books a year. We can't. No, we can't. We talk about some of the history you're talking about, Wounded Knee. We talk about, African American people in history. Hey, get over it. Stop. We don't want to hear anymore. Well, wait a minute. I thought you were ravenous consumers of history. Now you don't want to hear it. That's the kind of thing we have to confront. And people like you, the caller, thinking about it, encouraging others of your particular tribe, group, race, ethnicity to think about it is how we begin to change.
Freddie in Blakesley, Pennsylvania. Hey, Freddie, thanks for calling. You're on the air with me and Michael Eric Dyson.
Thank you for taking my call. Mr. Dyson, Professor Dyson, can I ask you this? When a certain percentage of white Democratic voters who voted Democratic all their lives, who also voted for Obama, decided to take their vote and switch it to Donald Trump, do you think it might have been something called, this is what I came up with it yesterday, watch the DNC, POC, people of color or multicultural fatigue?
Yeah, there's no doubt that there's, or what some POC fatigue or compassion fatigue or identifying with, black or brown or red or yellow people, sure. If the recent election was characterized as the kind of revenge of the white working class, it's interesting to me, first of all, the white working class does need to be paid attention to. That is no doubt about that. There is no doubt that that should be occurring, but not at the expense of understanding women's issues or issues of the environment or African-American and Latino people. There's a false dichotomy that's being driven, a wedge between those various, quote, identity groups. Now people will say, well, we got to get beyond identity politics. Well, when the identity was white male, nobody questioned it because it didn't have to be articulated. It didn't have to be examined. It didn't have to be acknowledged in that certain way because it was seen as American. One of the virtues of whiteness is to be seen as American, to be seen as neutral, to have whiteness rendered as invisible. And as a result of that, when white brothers and sisters say to us, hey, why can't you people just stop being obsessed with color? They don't realize that they have the advantage of having their whiteness identified with what it means to be a human being. So when it comes to that kind of fatigue, of course, like, oh, my God, there's another one. It's women, it's gay people, it's black people, it's brown people. When indeed what it is ultimately is about being a human being. Martin Luther King Jr. was in jail in Birmingham, and his white warden came to him and said, you know what, Dr. King, you're wrong. Segregation is right. King said, no, it's not. He said, but tell me how much money you make. They had a conversation. King finally said, look, you need to be out here marching with us. You've got more in common with us than you've got in common with the captains of industry and the business people and the overlords, or in this case, the so-called billionaires. Well, they're not so-called, except in the case of one, because we don't really know because he hasn't released his taxes. The billionaires who are out here, Wilbur Ross just got, sent through, Betty DeVos as Secretary of Education and so on. The so-called blue-collar billionaire is an oxymoronic statement, and white brothers and sisters who are working class and poor are not well served by people whose interests are not theirs, but they are sold a bill of good. And what are they sold a bill of good? That at least you're not the Negro, at least you're not the black person, at least you're not the embodiment of all that is scurrilous to American democracy, which is why Donald Trump could spend so much time beating up on Barack Obama, despite his intelligence and his achievement as an illegitimate, example of what it means to be an American citizen. So, yeah, there's a lot of fatigue going around, but the tragedy is it doesn't serve the interests of white working class people very well at all.
Or anybody else.
Right.
Except for Trump and his billionaire buddies, right?
There it is.
Kia in Federal Way, Washington. You're on the air.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call. Quick question. I've been a social worker for over 20 years of my life. I'm not white or I'm not black, but I am very much in support the race and social justice movement at my workplace. My big question is, how do we hold the people in power? How do we consequence them for continuing to be racist? And even though they say, well, I didn't mean for that to have that impact, and I didn't know that was going to negatively impact you.
Right.
How do we hold them accountable for the fact that, hey, if you don't have a diverse hiring panel, you're going to get X, or hey, if you don't listen to other people, you're going to continue to hire the same group of people that don't understand the people they're serving. And being a minority, I've spoken up, and what has happened to me directly is I have been shamed. But the white person was protected. The white employer was protected. Right. But then I was put in a box of she's angry. Oh my goodness, da da da. And then, of course, nobody wants to go to work and feel like just because I said one thing, now I'm this dangerous person at work when all my life I've been doing good work.
That's
but the white person gets protected and moved to another place, but no loss of pay, no loss of anything, and they just hope this passes. And so I'm really frustrated because I feel like as working professionals, when you care about people, what can we do? And my only answer is I feel like we have to negatively have consequences. We can't just talk about it. Talking doesn't do anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a brilliant analysis, and God bless you for your courage and your bravery in the face of, such opposition, because that's one of the ways people are silenced. They're stigmatized. They're demonized. They're marginalized. They're put to the periphery, and then the other people who may have been the source of the virus, so to speak, of bigotry or insensitivity or racism, are protected because, oh my God, it's horrible that this woman is attacking you that way. Again, that's another privilege of a certain variety and brand of whiteness. And I think, first of all, we got to do what you're doing today. We got to do what Brother Hartman does. We got to name it. We got to continue to name it. Now, that's a long-term strategy, but you got to erode the ignorance and the indifference and make people understand. You can't make them pay consequences if they're not even aware of the kind of clash between the ideals we nurture as Americans in this country about fairness and justice and equality, and yet we're not practicing in them, on the other hand, number one. Number two, the consequence you're talking about could be a couple of things. First of all, voting. Think about it. We got to put the right people in office. Now, we tried to vote this last time. When people talk about the populist revolution, where? Hillary Clinton won by nearly 3 million votes. You got lucky in 5 states. The Electoral College handed you the victory. That is not a mandate. But look at what's going on. The people who were opposed to Jeff Sessions, and Jeff Sessions trying to present himself as a little Lord Fauntleroy. Oh, no, I believe in justice, and I want. But what has he already done? Withdrawn a major objection in the Texas case of voter ID laws. That is devastating. This is exactly what the opponent said he would do, the kind of racial gerrymandering that he would do politically. And it leads to a weakened Justice Department, enhances the status of a racist practice in a state like Texas, and it makes the protection of the interests and the rights of black and brown people much more vulnerable. So we've got to continue to strike out in terms of dealing with our necessity of voting. I know a lot of people say, well, it doesn't make a difference. And we're laughing at banana republics because they don't have one man, one woman, one vote. And we thought we had it here. No, we're electing electors. We don't have it either. But we still got to stay on the front line. we still got to talk about voting rights laws. We got to still talk about voter ID laws. We still have to make a difference in terms of not only voting for the president, but down ballot. We got a midterm election coming up. Let's not give up all hope. Let's punish some of these Congress people for the support that they've given to Donald Trump. Let's deprive him of at least one of those houses, the Senate or the House, to be able to rubber stamp his positions. But let's also practice economic withdrawal. You know, Martin Luther King Jr. and others said, I'm not going to ride on the bus if you're going to diss us. If we begin to identify that Uber is messed up and on the board of Trump and so on, and you put enough publicity out there, then they get off the board. Of course, we said we're going to deal with Lyft and others, and then all of them. I mean, part of the thing is it's so pervasive. So many people are in the seats of power and in the bed of power that they make raw negotiations that really go against the interest of ordinary people. But we've got to have enough faith to believe that if we constantly keep up the organizing, the resisting, the raising our voices, that's the only hope and the ultimate hope we have of challenging the unjust arrangements that prevail in society and at the places where we work. But brave people like you, unfortunately, pay a price. But because you did what you did, you begin to challenge the system, and you never know how that challenge leads ultimately to overturning it altogether.
You are a brilliant preacher and professor. We are in your class and in your pews here.
Bless you, sir.
Michael Eric Dyson with us. Tears We Cannot Stop, A Sermon to White America is the title of his book. You need to get a copy. This is an amazing, extraordinary book. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
More of your calls in just a moment. Stick around. And welcome back. Anita in San Antonio, Texas, watching Free Speech TV on DirecTV. You are on the air with me and Michael Eric Dyson.
Hi.
Hey, Anita.
Professor Dyson,
How much do you think racism had to do with the election of Donald Trump? And also, I'd just like to say that for the past 50 years, white people have been basically, the majority of white people have been voting against their own self-interest. And now that same white majority is whining that things are so tough for them. Mm-hmm. So I don't understand why, because we are a growing coalition, the Democratic Party, the minorities and immigrants and that. But the white working class is actually dying off. That voter.
So your question is, to what extent did racism play a role in Trump's election?
Right.
Right. Okay.
Well, there's no question that part of the driving force behind the election of Donald Trump had everything to do with the perception that regardless of his distance, almost clinically from the white working class, he did embody some of the sense of resentment, the sense of lost opportunity, the sense that we're not being taken seriously. And yeah, when you're told that you have to share your toys in the sandlot of life, in the sandbox of life, it makes you upset. You get mad. I think part of the problem was that Barack Obama didn't have enough strength and didn't have enough vision and didn't have enough cojones to tell more of the truth. Now, I didn't think he could tell all of the truth to white America. We're not stupid over here. But it is true that Obama drew false equivalencies between black anger in the 1960s and white anger now. Well, white anger now has a lot to do with the fact that white people now have to share some of the resources they got unfairly in the 60s. And they're mad that they have to share it. That's not a legitimate anger, Mr. Obama. And so his failure, I think, to articulate that in a reasonable and morally compelling fashion led to the belief among many white people that they're mad at Obama and mad at other black people who are trying to hook black people up. So Obama's end didn't work out. His end game was rather, I think, problematic. So, yeah, I think a lot of white people were upset with Obama, got mad at him, and voted for Donald Trump. That's not the only thing. There are legitimate class interests there. You're right. People vote against their own self-interest. White brothers and sisters voting for Donald Trump doesn't make much sense to many people who know that he's going to get a bunch of billionaires in his cabinet. He's going to, do policies and enact policies that will not help working class white people, and that they will be in the same boat as vulnerable African American and Latino people. But I think what we have to do is to say to white brothers and sisters, hey, just because this guy is selling you a bill of good of white vengeance, that white vengeance may cost you economically. It gives you a good feeling emotionally, but what W.E. Du Bois talked about in his book, Black Reconstruction, as the psychic wages of whiteness. White people are sold the bill of goods. Hey, at least you're not a Negro. At least you're not the underling. At least you're not the worst dregs of society. And as a result of that, you are part of a white race that is superior. Yes, you may be suffering now and today, but economically, but you are still superior morally and mentally and spiritually. That will no longer sell. That no longer works. It does for many white brothers and sisters who are unconscious of the appeal made to them. But I think once we begin to put it in the open, like that story I told about Martin Luther King Jr., that white folk who are working class have much more in common with black, brown, red, and yellow people who are working class as well. Notice that at the same time that America said, through both the Democratic and Republican Party, let's get beyond identity politics, they said this was the resurgence of the white working class. Get the contradiction? You didn't say working class, you said white working class. So now the very notion of identity is reinscribed in the very distancing you want to have between politics and identity politics. It doesn't work, but whiteness is seen as universal, whiteness is seen as therefore neutral, and we don't get a chance to ask questions of it. That's what I'm trying to do in this book, is to get white folk to ask questions so they can see you may have more in common with the people who are black and brown than you have in common with the people who are white and brown.
There you go. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Michael Eric Dyson with us. Our last block here, and boy, we still have a whole bunch of calls for you. Ivory in Oroville, California.
I got to stick around. I got to stay on longer than an hour. I got to take over your show.
I got to debate a gun guy at the top of the hour. Sorry. But, you want to come back sometime? We can do 3 hours.
Oh, yeah, let's do that.
I would do it.
All right.
Ivory in Oroville, California. You are on the air.
Hello, Michael. I'm a big fan, and I'll be at the Amend conference in L.A. Tomorrow.
All right.
And, I just wanted to talk about the other day I went out, and I'm looking for an apartment. I'm a college student here at Butte College. And when I was talking on the phone with the person who I was supposed to get the place from and stuff, he sounded really nice and stuff and pretty much gave me all the information that I needed to go and get the place. And then when I got there, and he saw me and my brothers, because me and my brothers were moving in together, he instantly switched up and started talking about credit checks and stuff like that. And it kind of affects you, and so, it's kind of like a domino effect. When it happens to a lot of people, it pretty much, leaves you in a bad situation. And then that's like a domino effect that goes on. And I feel like that a lot of people fail to understand that and see that these things affect you in your life, and it moves on, and it's like a domino effect. And I just wanted to hear your thought on that.
Yeah, the domino effect of one thing happening and then another thing happening, and then, and they call these microaggressions, these little small infractions, offenses, small to who? They're normal, they're ritual, they're routine, they're daily, but they have a deleterious effect. They have a real negative effect. And when in accumulation, and when they're accumulated, they have a tremendously negative effect. And whether it's about housing, whether it's about retail stores, whether it's about being called a different name, whether it's about you getting mixed up with somebody else. I mean, there are all kinds of ways in which the ordinary processes of existence, whether in the housing front, whether in employment, whether engaging police people and the like, can have a awfully tough consequence for people of color in ways that white brothers and sisters don't get, don't understand, don't believe. I mean, Obama spent a lot of his time in office by saying, hey, we're not making this up. I mean, he says, black people are not making this up, because there's literally the belief that this is so irrational and so far from my experience that I can't even imagine that this could be real. And I think the caller is helping us understand that, yep, it is real, but the price that people of color pay, higher blood pressure, greater depression, constantly fighting against a system that doesn't seem to be sensitive to you, that can have a horrible impact on your health and on your life.
Tragically.
Mm-hmm.
Susan in Dallas, Texas. Hey, Susan, you're on the air.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. Dr. Dyson, I'm in the middle of your book, and I thank you so much for it.
Thank you.
I'm a white lady. I go to a nearly all-white church in downtown Dallas, and I have been attempting to teach groups of people in my church for several years about whiteness and about all of the issues you're speaking of. And I wanted to ask you about reaction that I've gotten that at first surprised me from the more left-leaning, white, liberal, well-educated, sophisticated people. They seem to have more problems talking about white privilege than people who are not so left-leaning. And they have, if I read from Where Do We Go From Here, where Dr. King has some pretty harsh words for the white liberal religious folk, that's harder for the left-leaning people to hear. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on that perspective or that reality.
Yes, ma'am. No, it's a very powerful and poignant observation. I was just in Dallas this past Sunday preaching at Friendship West Baptist Church for a couple of services. So I was right there in your neck of the woods. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to meet you there, and thank you for reading my book. You're raising a very important point. And many white brothers and sisters, can point to Donald Trump and go, oh, my God, I could never be that guy. He's horrible. He's a racist. He's a xenophobe. He's a sexist, and so on and so forth. I'm so much better than that. And then you think, well, how did Donald Trump get created? Remember, Frankenstein is the name of the doctor, not the monster. So the doctor creates the horrible creation that then bites back, destroys its very creator. And I think whiteness in that way operates, and whiteness that created Donald Trump, that created who he is, that created his worldview, his mindset, his outlook, his perspective. We don't often acknowledge that there's a relationship between John Boehner and Mitch McConnell and Eric Cantor and those figures within the Republican Party, Newt Gingrich and Donald Trump. The constant erosion of the beliefs about poor people of color or black people, the belief that they are somehow trying to own the dough, trying to take advantage of American society. So that stuff feeds that. And many more progressive, informed, liberal white people, as Dr. King said, may be more of a hindrance, he said, than the outright Ku Klux Klaner, because the outright Ku Klux Klaner says, I hate you, this is why, I don't even want to deal with you. He said some liberal whites thought that they were more informed than they were, and as a result of that, got more resentful. How dare you? I've been your friend. You're not grateful. What are you talking about? Allow me to show you all the things that I've done to sacrifice for you. I am hurt. Now you got white vulnerability. Now you got white fragility. Now you've got white hurt feelings. Now you've got white tears crying. And so it drowns out the tears of black people whose hurt and pain they've endured. Think about Renato Rosaldo, the anthropologist who had a concept called imperialist nostalgia. He says a culture destroys another culture and then weeps with it over its destruction, as if it doesn't know it was the reason for the destruction of the culture. Now there is empathy that is portrayed, but that empathy is inauthentic, because if you were truly empathetic, you wouldn't have destroyed my culture in the first place. That's akin to what goes on in many white liberal circles, where some white brothers and sisters may not be as conscious of their complicity in the very problems that they seek to oppose.
And then we see this reflected in Hollywood in the white savior complex that makes it into
Kevin Costner's in every film. I love him, but man, that dude has saved more black people than the NAACP.
It's a remarkable time, and it's a remarkable challenge we have. The book is Tears We Cannot Stop, A Sermon to White America. The author is Michael Eric Dyson. Toni Morrison says, elegantly written, a work to relish. Stephen King, here's a sermon that's as fierce as it is lucid. It shook me up, but in a good way. This is an absolutely brilliant book. You have to get it. Tears We Cannot Stop. Professor Michael Eric Dyson, thank you so much.
Thank you, my friend. You're a great man. Thank you so much.
Great having you with us. We will be back in just a few minutes. Go ahead.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Crash of 2016. This is page 34. Prior to this, we've set up how conservatives saw the 60s as a time of great social chaos and the rise of Ralph Nader and Rachel Carlson and the whole consumer and environmental movements as threats to profitability and business, and they had to do something about it. So page 34. Lewis F. Powell Jr. was just sitting down to breakfast in his suite at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City when he received a call from the White House. The year was 1971, more than 40 years since the last great crash. The 60s had ended and the Vietnam War had destroyed the Democratic Party, leaving Richard Nixon as President of the United States. And Nixon needed a favor. A thin, ascetic man with wispy hair and fragile features, Lewis Powell had ancestral roots in America's first European settlement, Jamestown, and a lifetime of participation in the law. He deeply loved his Richmond, Virginia home and the law practice he had there, which mostly consisted of defending corporate interests and wealthy Southern white men. He walked comfortably, often in crepe-soled shoes, dressed as a Southern gentleman, and spoke so softly that people sometimes leaned forward to listen. But when he spoke, his words were precise, well-measured, and carefully considered. He was one of the most brilliant jurists of his day, and so it's no surprise that the Nixon White House was considering him for a seat on the Supreme Court, a job he turned down at first. But then when Nixon called him again at the Waldorf Astoria, he reluctantly accepted. As a Supreme Court justice, Lewis Powell was very much the moderate, and his legacy on the high court would reflect his balanced and authentic interpretation of the rule of law in America. However, just a few months before he was nominated by Nixon, Powell had written a memo to his good friend Eugene Sindor Jr., the director of the United States Chamber of Commerce at the time. And Powell's most indelible mark on our nation was not to be his 15-year tenure as a Supreme Court justice, but instead that memo, which served as a declaration of war, a war by the economic royalists against both democracy and what they saw as an overgrown middle class. It would be a final war, a bella omnium contra omnis, against everything the New Deal and the Great Society had accomplished. It wasn't until September 1972, 10 months after the Senate confirmed Powell, that the public first found out about the Powell memo. The actual document had the word confidential stamped on it, a sign that Powell himself hoped it would never see daylight outside of the rarefied circles of his rich friends. By then, however, it had already found its way to the desks of CEOs all across the nation and was, with millions in corporate and billionaire money, already being turned into real actions, policies, and institutions. During its investigation into Powell as part of the nomination process, the FBI never found the memo, but investigative journalist Jack Anderson did, and he exposed it in a September 28, 1972 column titled, "Powell's Lessons to Business Aired." Anderson wrote, shortly before his appointment to the Supreme Court, Justice Lewis F. Powell Jr. urged business leaders in a confidential memo to use the courts as a social, economic, and political instrument. Pointing out that the memo wasn't discovered until after Powell was confirmed by the Senate, Anderson wrote, senators never got a chance to ask Powell whether he might use his position on the Supreme Court to put his ideas into practice and to influence the court on behalf of business interests. This was an explosive charge being leveled at the nation's rookie Supreme Court justice, a man entrusted with interpreting our nation's laws with absolute impartiality. But Jack Anderson was no stranger to taking on American authority and no stranger to the consequences of his journalism. He'd exposed scandals from the Truman, Eisenhower, Nixon, and later the Reagan administrations. He was a true investigative journalist. In his report on the memo, Anderson wrote, Powell recommended a militant political action program ranging from the courts to the campuses. Powell's memo was both a direct response to Roosevelt's battle cry decades earlier and a response to the tumult of the 1960s. He wrote, quote, no thoughtful person can question that the American economic system is under broad attack, end quote. When Sindor and the Chamber received the Powell memo, corporations were growing tired of their second-class status in America. Even though the previous 40 years had been a time of great growth and strength for the American economy and America's middle-class workers, and a time of sure and steady increases in profits for corporations, CEOs felt something was missing. If they could only find a way to wiggle back into the people's minds who were just beginning to forget the Royalists' previous exploits in the 1920s that had crashed our economy, then they could get their tax cuts back. They could trash the burdensome regulations that were keeping the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the food we eat safe. And the banksters among them could inflate another massive economic bubble to make themselves all mind-bogglingly rich. It could, if done right, be a return to the roaring 20s. But how could they do this? How could they convince Americans to take another shot at what was widely considered a dangerous free market ideology and economic framework, and that Americans once knew preceded every great crash and war? But Lewis Powell had an answer, and he reached out to the Chamber of Commerce, the hub of corporate power in America, with a strategy. As Powell wrote, strength lies in organization, in careful long-range planning and implementation, in consistency of action over an indefinite period of years, in the scale of financing available only through joint effort, and in the political power available only through unified action and national organizations. Thus, Powell said, the role of the National Chamber of Commerce is therefore vital. And out of the Powell memo came all these think tanks and judicial programs, college campus programs. He reshaped America, and it led directly to the Buckley versus Vallejo decision.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and on the line with us is Noel Flasterstein, the attorney and Second Amendment gun rights in a Second Amendment gun rights law practice. FLGunlaw.com is his website. You can tweet him at FLGunlaw. And Noel Flasterstein, welcome back to the program. It's been quite some time.
Yes, thank you. Always a pleasure to be with you, Tom. You're the one liberal I respect.
Well, thank you, sir. I won't make jokes at your expense then. I'm sorry, it's terrible. College students carrying guns. You got lawmakers in Arkansas, Florida, South Carolina, and Wyoming deciding whether to allow people to carry firearms in universities. This doesn't seem like a good idea to me. I mean, just a decade ago, we were debating whether people on college campuses should even be drinking, whether the drinking age should be lowered to 18 or not. And I think the broad consensus was, no, they're not quite adults yet. How can you justify arming drunken college freshmen?
Well, that's presuming that if someone's a college person, one, that they're a drunkard, and two, that they're going to have a weapon. I would think that gun owners, some probably drink and some probably don't drink. I know there's
all it takes is one, sir.
What's that?
All it takes is one.
Takes one drunk student with a gun? Is that what you're getting
shoot up a campus.
The whole point of allowing concealed carry on campus is for those responsible, law-abiding citizens that happen to be going to college, whether they're 21 or 24 or 44. If they want to exercise their Second Amendment just because they enter into a school zone, doesn't mean it should be denied. Now, I guess the basic thinking is, well, kids are irresponsible, or young adults that are in college are irresponsible, and they're going to get drunk and they're going to shoot each other. But this is specifically the reason why we have tragedies like Virginia Tech, like Sandy Hook, which isn't a college campus, but it's a gun-free zone. So the mad person who's meticulously thinking, let me go cause some carnage and damage, where's the best place to go? Should I go to the mall? No, people might be armed. Should I go to the local McDonald's? No, I might run into some armed people there. Oh, college campuses. By law, they're not allowed to have guns there. Let me go there because I'm going to, be able to cause the most havoc. Now, if you permitted students, lawfully that can lawfully carry concealed, and some of them we got to remember are veterans, the military. They're very well versed in firearms and they're very well versed in deadly force and when to use it. This would make the mad people think, well, this isn't a place to go. Otherwise, it's just a gun-free zone is a target zone.
So just to clarify, and you're the lawyer here, I'm not, and I had for 2 years when I lived in Georgia, when I was licensed as a detective after graduating from the Georgia Police Academy, I had a carry permit, a concealed carry permit, although I never concealed carried. I didn't own a gun. But my understanding was that was I carrying a gun, I could go pretty much anywhere I wanted in the state of Georgia, arguably not into a police station without revealing that I was carrying a weapon, and not into the state capitol. But I didn't realize that I could not walk onto a college campus in that state. Is that what you're saying, that you're advocating not for open carry, but concealed carry?
Well, yeah, I think at a very minimum, concealed carry, students.
But isn't concealed carry already legal on most college campuses?
Is it? Say again, I'm sorry.
Isn't concealed carry, in other words, somebody who, most states have somewhat rigorous requirements for concealed carry license. You've got to demonstrate proficiency. You've got to demonstrate competence. You've got to demonstrate that you have no criminal background. I would like to see liability insurance added to that. So, guns are sort of like cars. You get a license, you get the insurance, and you demonstrate your competence, but it's not. But that seems like a rational filter. Is it not true, though, that in these so-called gun-free zones that you're talking about, that if somebody has a concealed carry permit, they can walk into those places? They can go to class?
No, not by law. You're not allowed to carry a firearm in Florida, which has, very good laws for gun owners and people that cherish the Second Amendment and the Constitution.
Right.
No, you're not allowed to carry a firearm concealed. It's against the law. Now, us and like several other states are looking to introduce legislation to permit it. And the whole reason this is even in the legislators' mindset is to prevent tragedies like Virginia Tech, like Sandy Hook, because these are places that the deranged know that they can go and they're not going to encounter armed populace.
Noel, how do you deal with the fact, and it's a fact, I know you know this, that the more guns there are in a society, the more deaths there are going to be, and suicides go up as a consequence of the proliferation of guns, as do homicides. How could this possibly be a good thing for people on college campuses to have people running around with guns?
How could it be a good thing?
Right.
Because when the madman went to Virginia Tech, maybe a faculty member or maybe a student.
There were several armed people at Virginia Tech.
Who could have prevented him from carrying out the carnage that he did.
There were armed people at Virginia Tech. There were armed people at Navy Yard down here. There were 3 armed people when Gabby Giffords was shot. Having people around with weapons isn't going to stop these crazy folks. And although, stopping them from getting guns would be a nice help, except, Donald Trump and the Republicans, I don't know if they succeeded in doing this. I know it was queued up to go to do away with, well, actually, they did succeed in doing it. They said that, it was illegal for people who are so mentally ill that they are 100% disabled on Social Security to own a gun. It was 75,000 people nationwide, and the Trump administration just did away with that rule. Social Security no longer can pass that information along to law enforcement. And
that's presuming that every mental ill person is deranged, out of touch with reality. Well, maybe they just have an issue with depression, and maybe they're grieving excessively over the loss of a pet. This doesn't mean they have the right to protect themselves.
So are you saying that people grieving over the loss of a pet qualify for full Social Security disability?
I don't think mental illness or having mental challenges means you should lose your constitutional rights. But based on what you're saying, that's what you're suggesting.
Yeah, exactly. If somebody is so, and you mentioned depression. I mean, that's what's the major risk factor for depression? It's suicide.
Let's deny them many, many things. There are plenty of people that have things that would qualify and constitute legally.
So basically, you have no limits. You think that, you're not in favor of any kind of rational limits on the ownership of guns.
There's rational limits already in place. If somebody has been committed to a mental institution, they're not allowed to have a firearm under federal law.
But the day they walk out, they can.
But if somebody is receiving benefits because they have an anxiety issue, which have never shown any tendency to create violence, I don't think that's enough.
No, you've never tried to get Social Security. You've never tried to get Social Security disability.
You can't make rational decisions.
I have had friends who have tried to get Social Security disability. It can take, on average, about 2 years to get the claim process. You really have to demonstrate that you are totally disabled. And but in any case, I get what you're saying. Noel Flasterstein, the attorney, Second Amendment gun right law practice, flgunlaw.com. Do you expect to hear the president speaking about this tonight?
About the gun issue?
Yeah.
Who knows what he's going to say regarding that?
Yeah, or anything else for that matter. Yeah, good point. Noel, thanks a lot for being with us today.
Thanks for having me on. Thank you.
Yeah, good talking with you. We'll be back. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. And welcome back. Excuse me, Susan, watching Free Speech TV on the Dish Network in, is it Lutz, Florida? Lutz. Okay, L-U-T-Z. So what's up, Susan?
Well, there's a question I've been asking, somewhat off topic, but, in a way related. When they deport people, and this is going to be a concern, the more people they deport, what happens to all the belongings of the people there? It seems to me that I see them going over the border with nothing. They're just dumped over there. I don't know how they survive in Mexico. There's only a few of them, but when it becomes more, I guess it's going to be the country of Mexico's responsibility to take care of all the indigent people we're going to dump over there. But what happens? Does the government confiscate everything that they have? And some people have accumulated some wealth in here.
Yeah. If they are accused of a crime, and increasingly the Trump administration is saying that being in this country without documentation is a crime, if they're accused of a crime, then law enforcement under the civil asset forfeiture laws can basically steal everything you have and convert it into anything from a new tank for the local police department to, a series of pizza parties. I don't know how common that is, civil asset forfeiture for people, undocumented immigrants in the United States. But, it's certainly a possibility. I mean, like with any arrest, they take you and basically you lose everything. You have access to nothing. I mean, ultimately, not even your own clothing. They put you in the orange jumpsuits and things. So, this is a terrible problem. And looking at it from the point of view of Mexico, they're looking at literally billions of dollars a year coming into Mexico as a consequence of people working in the United States and sending money home to their families. Those people get deported from the United States to Mexico, and Mexico not only loses those transfer payments, but now they also have somebody who doesn't have a job and who might end up on welfare in Mexico. So it's one of the big reasons why Mexico is so opposed to this, basically. Susan, thanks for the call. Thomas in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, watching us on YouTube. Hey, Thomas, what's up?
Hey, how's it going? So I've noticed, at least reading the news, that there's been a significant rise in anti-Semitic activity since the election.
Yeah.
And
actually, since the end of the primary, I'd say.
And just on Sunday in Philadelphia, over 100 tombstones were destroyed in a Jewish cemetery.
Right.
In the northeast section of the city. And anytime Donald Trump is pressed on this issue, his only response is, "Oh, I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm the least anti-Semitic person in the world."
Right.
Well, so he never actually condemns the specific activities and says we should do something about this, and we should go after those who are going after the Jewish community or going after the black community. And I was wondering, why do you think this is?
Well, first of all, he did last week, he did come out and finally say anti-Semitism is terrible. He did not say, as you just said, we should go after these anti-Semites. And I think the reason why is because that's part of his base, and he knows it. He wouldn't be in the White House if it weren't for white racists and white anti-Semites. And so he's got to continue to cater to that base. And I mean, you know, it's the base of Fox so-called news. It's the base of right-wing hate radio. It's the base. It's the base of white supremacists. So, you know, he doesn't want to blow them up. Thomas, thanks for the call. Thanks for watching us on YouTube. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Doug in Hamul, California. Hey, Doug, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, you hear me?
I do.
Yeah, I had you on speaker. Hey, I was listening to, you know, Bill Nye, the science guy, right?
I don't know him personally, but I know who he is.
He would consider him a progressive, right? He's for climate change. He believes humans.
I have no idea what his politics are. I know what his science is.
All right. Well,
every scientist who's not employed by the fossil fuel industry agrees that climate change is real, Doug.
Well, last night Tucker Carlson just destroyed him on his show. I've been tweeting Tucker Carlson to have you on his show, and you could pick whatever subject you want. And I would love to see Tucker Carlson. Okay,
Doug, thanks. I'm not going to promote Tucker Carlson on this program. Doug, thanks a lot for trying to be my booking agent, but ain't going to happen. Jeremiah, and by the way, Fox won't have me on. They blackballed me ever since I wrote Crash of 2016, which has a whole chapter about how Roger Ailes was creating GOP TV in the Nixon White House and then did it with Rupert Murdoch and calls it Fox so-called news. Jeremiah in Pulaski, Virginia. Hey, Jeremiah, what's on your mind today?
Hi. I just wanted to call in and give, I don't know, some information about some of the stuff that the previous guest you had on was talking about, specifically with the Virginia Tech shooting.
Okay.
And what the gun laws are here in Virginia. I'm a gun dealer, and I personally know the gentleman who sold the gun to the Virginia Tech shooter.
Oh, that's got to be a heavy burden to bear.
It's destroyed him as far as that goes.
Yeah.
And he did 100% everything legal as far as that is concerned. The background check went through. But the background checks, and I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot for saying this, being a dealer, the background checks are very lackadaisical.
Yeah.
They don't go nearly far enough. In fact, honestly, they don't even know who the person is buying the gun because they don't use Social Security numbers, any of that, to do the background check.
Really? How do you do it? Just on the name?
Just from a name and an address.
Wow.
And
that's not a good record search, especially if you got somebody with a common name.
Yeah, all they know is that a person with this name who says they live here, and according to their driver's license, because you only have to have one form of ID, right, is attempting to buy whatever gun. They don't even know what gun you're buying. Wow. All they know is that John Smith came in to buy a rifle, or Tom Jones came in to buy a pistol. They don't know what it is, who he is, any of that.
Sounds like buying a gun is easier than voting in some states.
Right.
Wow.
So it's a horrible system.
So you're a gun dealer. What do we do about this?
What's that?
I said you're a gun dealer, Jeremiah. You're an informed fellow on this. What do we do about it?
They need to go in and completely redo all of the gun paperwork because it's just a yes/no question system. They need to start using Social Security numbers and actually verify that you are who you are, and just quit selling guns to anybody. The people that I know that the Second Amendment people that come into my store to buy guns, they all agree with this 100%. They don't mind because they're already buying them legally. So they don't mind having tougher gun laws. They don't mind closing up these loopholes at the gun shows and the flea markets and things of that nature. They're already putting their name on the books for the guns they're buying, and they don't want other people to be able to get these guns illegally.
I'm curious Jeremiah, what you think as a Virginia gun dealer, what you think of my free market solution here, to borrow the phrase from the other party, which is, drunken drivers, for example, were a problem, or just bad drivers were a problem, until in the 1950s we passed laws that said that you have to have liability insurance, at the very least, liability insurance in order to drive a car. So if you're a terrible driver and you kill somebody, at least, their family will get something. And the result of that was that really bad drivers found it harder and harder to continue driving because their insurance prices went from, $100 a month to $1,000 a month after their first DUI conviction kind of thing. And so rather than having the government figuring out who are the bad guys and who are not, have a company, an insurance company, that's actually making a profit doing this by being paid for the liability insurance. And my understanding is that the annual cost for gun liability insurance could be, for a person with a clean record, could be easily under $60 or $80 a year. But that having a license and having, basically treat guns like cars. You've got to have liability insurance and you've got to demonstrate proficiency by being licensed. And then you buy it legally, the serial number gets tracked from manufacturer to destruction the same way with a car. What do you think of that?
I agree with it. I actually looked into this about 6 months ago, and you can actually there's already companies that will offer you insurance on your firearms.
Yeah, the NRA used to offer it years ago. I mean, I was an NRA member back 2 decades ago, and I believe I remember that they sold insurance.
Yes, there are some people affiliated with the NRA. Now, I own a gun store, and I'm not in any way, shape, or form affiliated with the NRA and will never be affiliated with them. But having said that, they do have contacts that you can go through to get that insurance, and it's as cheap as $20 a year.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Unless
it's a very small fee, and I promise you it will not inhibit true gun buyers and enthusiasts from buying in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, but if somebody like Adam Lanza, who has a history of psychiatric illness, of being thrown out of school repeatedly, of petty violence, if somebody like that, the background check might not catch him, but I'm guessing that the insurance company, if they've got serious money on the line, would. And I think it's just astonishing that the families of those kids in Newtown, they got nothing, whereas if their kids had been plowed down by a drunk driver, they would have got $1 million each.
Right.
Yeah. So there's just something.
It's a very simple fix. There's very simple fixes to all of these things, but they don't want simplicity.
Right.
So, I've tried to introduce some information to our state legislation here to sew up the gun show loopholes, and they just don't want to do that.
They're taking too much money from the NRA. I really think that's it. I think this is the corrosive influence of money in our politics. Jeremiah, thanks for the rational conversation and for your insights as a gun dealer in Virginia. I appreciate it. We'll be right back. Coming up on the bottom of the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, coming up to 28 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls and the news of the day. I got to tell you what Shell Oil, what they knew back in 1991. It's amazing.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of the news of the day, your calls, and my thoughts right after this. The cross currents and dynamics at work in this evolving Trump administration are absolutely fascinating. He has virtually none of the institutional Republicans on board with the populist message that got him elected to the White House. Right? If Donald Trump had said, okay, here's my message, guys. I'm going to be a classic Republican running for president, and I want to privatize Medicare. I want to turn Social Security over to Wall Street. I want to roll back the protections for gay people. I want to undo Roe v. Wade. I want to strengthen the drug law and build more private prisons. I want to privatize all aspects of healthcare in the United States. The list just goes on and on. If he had said, we're gonna certify Citizens United, and we're gonna put it into legislation, and in addition to the Supreme Court. We're going to continue the war on drugs. We're going to continue our, building our military like, well, he did say that. We're going to have more money for defense contractors. We're going to push for the TPP and other trade deals. If he had said those things, he never would have gotten elected. If Donald Trump had gone through the Republican agenda, he never would have gotten elected. But he didn't. He defied the Republican Party in their own primary. He got elected to the Republican, as the Republican candidate for president of the United States by saying George W. Bush was the worst president in history. I will not touch your Social Security or Medicare. We're going to bail out the people instead of the banksters. Some of these banksters need to be going to jail. The TPP is dead on arrival, and in fact, I'm going to tear down NAFTA and all that other stuff. That's the stuff he got elected on. Now, he threw in a few sops to the racists, the homophobes, actually, it wasn't so much an anti-gay agenda other than having Mike Pence on his platform, on his ticket. Mike Pence is arguably the most virulently anti-gay politician in the United States of any consequence. Certainly one of the most anti-woman politicians in the United States of any consequence. But Trump didn't run on that. Trump ran on this populist stuff. And you will not find a Republican who will agree with him on these things. There used to be populist and progressive Republicans. Not just, Howard Taft and William Howard Taft and Teddy Roosevelt. But, there used to be progressive Republicans, in the 60s and 70s. The real purge of the Republican Party, getting rid of the progressives in the Republican Party, happened in the 1980s, or began in the 1980s during the Reagan administration, and then really picked up steam during the George W. Bush administration. And so there's nobody left in the Republican Party who agrees with Donald Trump on the main things that people who voted for him for president were hoping he would do. So what's going to happen? Is he going to do it like Reagan and make it all smoke and mirrors? That's been my prediction all along. That he will spend a bunch of money on infrastructure, which will create a bunch of jobs and it'll stimulate the economy. And he'll do a giant tax cut for billionaires, but there'll be enough in that tax cut to give a couple $100 to the average person, which will stimulate the economy. And he'll say, see, the tax cuts worked. Trickle down actually does work. Ronald Reagan was right. When in fact, it wasn't the tax cuts, it was the infrastructure spending that did it. And, he and all the Republicans will lie about it, as they've been doing for 40 years. And, it'll give them the power to do more and more of that. Or is Donald Trump going to actually stand up and say, I have no loyalty to these guys? The institutional Republican Party. In fact, I would say when he made Steve Bannon his chief strategist, it was a giant middle finger to the Republican Party. Steve Bannon is the guy who said that they should be, his phrase, bitch slapped, as I recall. Or I should say B-word slapped. My apologies. But you get my point. Is he going to take on the Republican Party? I don't think he will, unless we all help him a little. Not sure yet how to do that, but the strategies are evolving. Stay tuned.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
There is a real opportunity here, I believe. We'll see.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All the important stories we cover and the issues we care about are at HartmannReport.com. Members of our community can comment and join the conversation.
A couple of quick things. I think it was somebody on Twitter turned me on to this. Maybe it was in our chat room. PaidLiberalProtester.com. You can earn $1,500 a week. The gun guy said so. Welcome to Paid Liberal Protesters. It's a thing, and it pays big bucks. A great career choice, says Rex Hupke, Chicago Tribune, fake news. And then there's a little click that says, get paid to protest. And when you click on it, it takes you to, well, I'll let you see that. It's hysterical. It's great. Anyhow, there's that. And then The Guardian breaking this story today, the 28th of February, Damian Carrington and Jelmer Mommers writing for The Guardian. The headline, Shell knew oil giant's 1991 film warned of climate change danger. And the first couple sentences here. The oil giant Shell issued a stark warning of the catastrophic risks of climate change more than a quarter of a century ago in a prescient 1991 film that has been rediscovered. However, since the company has invested heavily in the highly polluting oil reserves and helped lobby against climate action, leading to accusations that Shell knew the grave risk of global warming, but did not act accordingly. Shell's 28-minute film called Climate of Concern was made for public viewing, particularly in schools and universities. It warned of extreme weather, floods, famines, and climate refugees as fossil fuel burning warmed the world. The serious warning was endorsed by a uniquely broad consensus of scientists. This is quoting from the film. Endorsed by a uniquely broad consensus of scientists in their report to the United Nations at the end of 1990, the film noted. It's pretty amazing. And right now, the SEC is investigating ExxonMobil, and as are some state attorneys general, for basically the same thing, knowing that their product was killing the earth and then ultimately burying that knowledge. And in fact, funding people who openly denied it, people like Tucker Carlson, openly denying climate change or questioning, oh, gee, it's a debate. No, I'm sorry, it's not a debate. LJ in Chicago. Hey, LJ, what's on your mind today?
Hi, how you doing today?
Good. What's up?
Yeah, I want to speak on, actually, I wanted to speak to Mr. Dyson, but I missed that opportunity, so I want to speak about the college and the young kids carrying the guns open or carry concealed in college. I don't think they're ready for it. I'm a retired police officer. And I'm going to tell you something, we have to train when to shoot and have the proper cover and think about the people in the background if you miss. These people who get in these permits get minimum training. They'll shoot at anything. They'll buy a high-clip round thinking if you shoot 17 times, you might hit one thing. But what about the other people, that innocent people around? They shouldn't be done. They should specifically have people in universities, in colleges, or certain students to carry that you do have the ability to stop somebody, but not everybody. They'll all be shooting. It'll be shooting like a barroom fight on a cowboy picture, everybody shooting. That's what it will be. I think that's the worst thing that they can do. Here it is. We living in a society today where we got rage in the traffic. You got legal marijuana. Now you got people with guns, and now you got all that put together. Just think about it. I mean, they doing everything but driving.
Yeah.
They got the GPSs. They're looking at TV, got the guns, they're smoking reefer. Where are we? It's terrible. Now we got Donald Trump, who had to ask the question about, we got these nuclear weapons. Why haven't we used them sooner? What kind of question is that for him to be asking when they were preparing him when he won? Why haven't we been using this? See, he doesn't have any understanding. So we got a leader like that. And these other people who support him, because you said it earlier, and you know, these relatives of these distant Confederate people who lost the North-South War and the Reconstruction when Lincoln had to compromise with Andrew Johnson, didn't know he was going to die. Let these people who lost the war, we didn't finish Reconstruction, now they're here today, flying Confederate flags for the Second Amendment. That guy you talked to who owned the store in Virginia knows they want guns because it's to their advantage because they can kill minorities now. Because Donald Trump will think nothing about deputizing them when martial law comes, and now they can kill people that they want to kill legally because when martial law comes, your constitutional rights are suspended.
Well, you don't even need martial law. Just ask the relatives of Trayvon Martin. All you need is a stand your ground law.
That's exactly right. That's true, but still in law, your thinking has to be object and not subject. In other words, the law don't let you make the decision, well, I thought he was going to kill me. Your thinking has to be objective where other people would agree, like 12 people, like would I have done the same thing? So you just can't say, well, I thought he's going to kill me. Here he is 40 feet away from you. So that's not going to work all the time. It has to be reasonable. Yeah. It's a reason we believe that you will be put in danger. You just can't say, well, I thought because everybody would get away with murder. Well, I thought he was going to kill me. That's why I shot him. Well, no, that's not good enough.
Well, unfortunately, LJ, we're hearing that excuse from police officers all the time, and they seem to be getting off with it.
But that's different. Those are police officers, and police officers are protected one. There's a thing called acting under color of law. And what it means is that you got some bad rogue police officers that use their badge to commit crimes and do things that they're not supposed to be doing. And the only reason that the person that they're doing the crime against won't retaliate is because they're the police and they got the radio and they got the backup. But for that badge, and they didn't have that, they would fight them back.
Right.
So those are bad police officers who act under color of law. And when you do that, you're not the police legally. And you have a right to use deadly force against a police in uniform who's acting like that, but it's hard to prove because he's going to say that, no, he was making an arrest, and the rest of them are going to back him up. Right. So it's a hard thing to prove.
Yeah, and this takes us into the...
uses his authority to commit a crime, you have a right to fight him like you would fight anybody else. So good Samaritans with guns and open concealed carry can make citizens arrest, and they can use deadly force. But are they properly trained to do it? They can intervene and stop a robbery and kill an armed person that's robbery. They can do that, but they're not properly trained. Yeah. And that's the terrible thing about it.
Yeah, good points. Good points all. LJ, thanks for listening to WCPT, and thanks for your comments. Andy in Wenatchee, Washington, listening on Sirius XM. Hey, Andy, what's on your mind?
The interview that you had really struck close to home with me, even though our situation isn't in a university, it's in the workplace, where we have a company policy that says no firearms at work, in company vehicles, on the company property. It's kind of explicit. Yet we have one guy who insists on carrying a sidearm everywhere he goes. He's
visibly,
but I'm assuming he also carries concealed.
Yeah.
But out in the open where everybody can see it is where we see it.
So he's flaunting the rules of the company. Why has he not been fired?
Well, I brought this up because we are now starting to have company meetings where everybody's in the same confined space, basically. And I brought this up with the new manager. I says, we have a new manager who's bringing in some new rules. Not everybody's happy with them. And we have one employee who in particular doesn't like rules, and he insists on carrying his gun everywhere he goes, including to work and including to these company meetings. And some of us are uncomfortable about it. Mm-hmm. And the first thing he tells me is, we really have that rule in the book? And I said, I looked it up. It's there. Yeah. And so while he's looking it up, we continue to talk about this. And he says, well, you need to know that I'm a big Second Amendment supporter. And I says, you need to know that I'm not anti-gun, but I don't want to see any of my coworkers get hurt.
Right.
And so he finds the rule, and then his response is, well, I think what we're going to have to do is, he says, I don't think that it's a good idea for us to, trying to think exactly how I put it. Essentially, he says, I don't think we should pull the rule or anything. I think what we're going to have to do is we will figure out a way to keep everybody happy. Then what came out in the company meeting about 2 weeks later was it's come to our attention that some of you are not happy with guns. You don't like guns anyway, and you're not happy with the Second Amendment. So those of you that do want to carry a gun, we do have this rule in place. And so what you need to do to get around it is just cover up your gun.
Right, conceal carry.
People that you might offend.
Yeah.
And but when I was having that meeting a couple of weeks earlier with the manager, another thing that he said that really struck me odd was not odd; it was frightening. He says, "Well, I'll tell you what's under attack. Not just our Second Amendment rights, but he says white men are becoming an endangered species in America."
Oh, geez.
In about a month and a half, he says we're going to change all that.
Oh, no. God save us. Andy, thanks for the call, and thanks for the horror story, I think. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We're going to check in with Talk Media News in a few minutes, find out what's going on in the world, and we'll be taking your calls. And, at the top of the hour, Jessica Jackson is going to be with us, too. And welcome back. Lisa in San Francisco, watching Free Speech TV on DirecTV. Hey, Lisa, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. I hope you are, too.
I am doing well, thank you. Well, I wanted to, again, speak to the other professor, but I missed that. But about your caller, your guest caller, regarding guns in schools, how wrong. I just can only think to compare it as to when I was a flight attendant for 26 years for United. Oops. Well, I'm retired now. So
it's a great airline. It's okay, Lisa.
I was thinking after 9/11, pilots now get to carry guns as a precautionary measure on the planes. I don't know if this is common knowledge, but we've had briefings where they just simply say, if we determine that there's some sort of scuffle going on behind the door, we will simply shoot and aim to kill. And we suggest you just duck and make yourself scarce because you may be collateral damage. And we've just been so against them having guns. Yes, they're trained, but they're not certain what's going on behind them with the door closed, and anything can be misconstrued.
What percentage of these pilots do you think are actually carrying guns, Lisa?
It's just so unsafe.
Lisa, what percentage of these pilots are actually carrying guns?
Oh, my. Once they were given authority to get them, my guess would be 80%.
Wow.
If not more.
Wow.
They're scared to death. And anybody with a gun who's scared is more scary.
Right, is dangerous.
As we've seen.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Lisa, thank you for sharing that story with us. That's thought-provoking. Thank you very much. Sam in Sequim, Washington. Hey, Sam, what's on your mind today?
Hello, Tom. I hate to change the subject, but I wanted to talk about how to make the Democratic Party an honest party again.
Okay.
They had their, they elected Perez yesterday or the day before, but they still decide to take corporate money.
Right.
I think this is a huge mistake. Right now,
I agree.
We're in a perfect position to drain our own swamp. I've been an activist for years, and I have never seen this much energy. I mean, we have Indivisible, we have Bernie's Revolution. The Democratic parties are overflowing with people coming. And if we become an honest party and be clear with our members, say, hey, we're not taking corporate money. We work for you. You have to give us money. I think we can build a party that's going to take this country back.
Yeah, I totally agree, Sam, 100%, 1,000%. And frankly, I think that, of the millions of dollars that Bernie raised, had Bernie been taking corporate money, had he been saying, yeah, sure, I'll take corporate money, and by the way, will you donate too? He would have raised, 10% of what he raised. I think the appeal for 90% of the people who donated to him the appeal of kicking, anywhere from $1,500 to $1,500 Bernie's way was, this is a guy who only gets his money from us, and so we're going to step up. And I agree with you. I think when the party had that vote, and they decided to continue having lobbyists be members of the party who could vote and choose the leadership, and they decided to continue taking corporate money from those lobbyists, at that point, A, I knew that Tom Perez was going to be the head of the DNC, and B, I thought, okay, this is not a good thing. I totally agree. Sam, thanks for the call. We'll be back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And by the way, new article out on Alternet. It's titled, "Here's Proof Republicans Are Done with Democracy." And I think you'll find it interesting. Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com. And on the line with us is Patrick Gavin with Talk Media News. Patrick, welcome.
Hey, how are you?
Good. So what's happening in the world today?
Well, obviously, we're all just waiting until 9 o'clock tonight to watch President Trump's address before Congress. Some of the initial reports coming out of the White House today is that it's going to be a little bit less dark than his inauguration.
Well, that's what Alex Jones said yesterday. He said that the White House gave him the talking points, and then immediately they appeared also on, Breitbart or someplace else like that?
Yeah, exactly. So the tone is going to be a little bit more optimistic. One of the ways, of course, that Trump hopes to do that is by railing off what he sees as, this long laundry list of accomplishments that they've accomplished so far. Some of those things obviously include mostly executive actions, but definitely hammering home this idea of the president does what he says and follows through on his promises. I think one of the interesting things, a couple of interesting things I think to look out for tonight, one substantive and one significantly less so. First is talking about health care reform. This Obamacare repeal and replace process is coming under a ton of strain, especially within congressional Republicans. And, I think that even though congressional Republicans are inclined to support the president in a lot of ways, they really want specifics about what exactly is this repeal and replace process going to look like. What am I supposed to say? And this is a great example of how these town hall meetings are having an impact, although people on the right would like to deny it, is that, Republicans are sort of left with their hands up in the air when they go to these town halls from angry constituents because they don't know what to say to, a 22-year-old kid who's going to lose his health care or a 65-year-old woman who's going to lose her health care because they literally don't know. Like, they don't have the plan from President Trump. And, they need something, I think, from Trump tonight besides just platitudes about what exactly is this going to look like. How is it going to be different than the previous presidents? How are we going to pay for it? But, Trump's not a big specifics guy, especially in these kind of arenas. But I think that,
Well, there's a fundamental problem here. In the 1980s, the Republican Party reinvented itself quite consequentially. And the doctrine going forward from the 1980s is we're redefining what conservative means. From now on, conservative means basically anything that can be done by the government or anything that has to do with the commons, anything that can be done by the government should appropriately not be done by the government, with possibly the exception of the Army, but even that has been more than half privatized. Instead, it should be done by somebody who's very wealthy who can make a lot of money off this, or even not necessarily very wealthy, but it should be done by the so-called free market. And what that means is that you've got to have a profit motive in absolutely everything. You've got 20%, our healthcare bill in this country, this is the largest industry in the United States. It represents, $4 or $5 trillion a year, if my recollection is correct. It's several trillion anyway. And 20% of that's being skimmed off the top by health insurance companies. No other country in the world even allows that. That's a crime in every other developed country in the world to sell primary health insurance on a for-profit basis. It's actually a crime that people can go to jail for. Here in the United States, it is the one thing that Republicans embrace is we've got to figure out a way to have our donors in the health insurance companies and the big drug companies be able to kick back some of this money to us in the form of campaign contributions so we can continue getting elected and we can, bow down and kiss the butt of this ideology of the free market. If Donald Trump wants to be the most popular president in the history of the United States, all he has to do is follow Tommy Douglas, the premier of Saskatchewan back in the 50s, who established single-payer health care in Canada. He is, to this day, the most beloved Canadian that there ever was. But, he can't do that with the Republicans, because the Republicans are, oh, wait a minute, nobody's going to make profit off this? Yeah, we're going to save trillions of dollars. We're going to, people are, but nobody's going to make a profit? How can that work? And I'm waiting to see. I mean, Trump said we're going to cover everybody. It's going to be better coverage than you have, and it's going to be less expensive. There is no way to do that without single payer. So what's he going to do?
Right. And I think to your point, I don't think that. Right, two things. One is how can he do it in a way that actually looks different than Obamacare? Because of the things you just mentioned that he does want to keep, it's hard to do it without the kind of infrastructure that Obamacare.
Well, and even Obamacare is it's a Heritage Foundation project. It was first introduced by Richard Nixon. Mitt Romney did it in Massachusetts. That's the Republican health care plan, is Obamacare. And the Democratic health care plan is single payer. So, Donald Trump already has his Republican plan. What's he going to do? I don't, and it looks to me like there's a huge collision coming if he's going to keep his promises between him and the Republicans. Or he's going to do like Reagan, make the promises, break the promises, and simply lie about whether he made the promises or not. I mean, Reagan kept talking about middle-class tax cuts, but he raised taxes on working people 18 times in the 8 years he was in office. Taxes on people making less than $50,000 a year were higher when Reagan left than they were when he came in. On the other hand, taxes on millionaires and billionaires went from 74% down to 25% under Reagan. But through that entire period, he was constantly lying to the working class people, saying, I'm cutting your taxes. And there was no social media, basically, to keep him accountable. I don't think that Trump can pull that off.
Right. I mean, I think that if Trump had his way, two things would happen. One, he would just rename Obamacare Trumpcare, but not really change much for all the reasons you just cited. And two, I don't think he would touch this issue at all. I mean, Trump, say what you want to say about Trump, he's smart enough to know that the politics of healthcare and how it cripples presidents, especially in their first year. And, Trump is not a policy wonk. He's not somebody who wants to sort of hang his presidency on healthcare, and not only healthcare, but repealing a previous president's healthcare proposal. His hands are going to be forced on that issue, but I think the reality is that, he would rather not touch this if he could have his way.
Right, but he can't have his way. I mean, the entire Republican Party has been, the principal device that they've used to vilify President Obama from, month one or month 3 or 4 when he first talked about Obamacare is his health care program, Obamacare. And I mean, they're so committed to the idea that this thing is a disaster. And of course, Marco Rubio blowing up the risk corridors, a year ago, so that in October of 2016, the health insurance companies would suddenly have to raise their rates, which they did, of course. But he did that by amending the budget bill in November of 2015. And as the New York Times, reports very clearly, I mean, all of this stuff is Marco Rubio and a bunch of Republicans in the Senate, and the House went along with it, of course. But so they've damaged Obamacare now. How what are they going to fix it?
Well, and speaking of that, I mean, a poll came out last week by the Kaiser Foundation that actually said that approval ratings for Obamacare is at its highest since 2010. So all this talk is happening at a time when I think the American people are actually saying, you know what, let's just stick with the devil we know, than going through what.
Except that the devil we know is dying. I mean, when Mitch McConnell says Obamacare is dying, it is, and it's dying because Rubio took away the risk corridors. The health insurance companies have no backstop if they have a bad year, so they're pulling out.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's going to be an interesting couple months to see what happens, and tonight will certainly set the stage for that.
Yeah, there you go. Patrick Gavin, Talk Media News. Patrick, thank you.
Take care.
Good talking with you. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. And welcome to Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight, The Fate of the World and What We Can Do About It. And this is from page 165, The Lives of Ancient People. From the San and the Kogi Value, Community, and Cooperation, we are part of the world, not separate from it. Chapter. One of the oldest cultures on Earth is that of the Kung Bushmen. It's an exclamation mark to make the noise. Of the Kalahari Desert in the northern parts of South Africa. The exclamation point in their name, Kung, represents a sound in their language which we don't have in English. It's a popping noise made in the mouth by forming a vacuum between the tongue and the top of the mouth and then pulling the tongue down quickly. There are three other sounds in their language for which we have no letters, all of them clicks or pops, made by similarly clicking the tongue against the front of the mouth or the sides of the mouth and teeth. They're such a unique culture that although they're ancient, their language contains sounds that have traveled to no other human tongue on Earth. Over the past few decades, as they become more well-known, they've asked anthropologists and linguists that they be called the San, although most texts from before the 1980s refer to them as the Kung. They and their life are portrayed wonderfully well in the film The Gods Must Be Crazy. The San are racially distinct from the other Africans who have conquered the continent in the past millennia. Their skin is more yellow than black, and their eyes are slightly slanted as if they share a common ancestor with Asians, or perhaps are indeed an early ancestor of the Asians. Their hair is black and curly like other Africans, but they're comparatively short and thin, often standing less than 5 feet tall and weighing fewer than 100 pounds. The lives of the San were first chronicled quite elegantly by Lawrence Vanderpost, a South African explorer and writer. In his 1961 book, The Heart of the Hunter, he tells of coming across a small Kung tribe of about a dozen adults and children as they crossed a particularly hot and barren part of the desert. Vanderpost and his fellow explorers started hunting some game so the Bushmen could have extra food to carry on their journey toward the lightning on the horizon, where the seasonal rains were beginning. The explorers spent an entire day hunting with their Land Rovers and provisioned the Bushmen well for their trip. As the little tribe was leaving, Vanderpost and his group stood to wave goodbye, but the Bushmen simply walked off with many smiles. No thank yous were ever given for all that food. One of Vanderpost's assistants, a hunter who'd never encountered Bushmen before, commented that they seemed ungrateful and uncaring. Ben, one of the other men in the group who understood Bushman culture, responded that to give another human food and water is only good manners and is routine behavior among the Bushmen. If the white men had been starving on a long trek and the Bushmen had found them, they would immediately share their food and water, even if it endangered their own survival, and they would not expect a thank you in response. In fact, in San Bushman culture, to eat in front of another person who is without food is considered an immoral act, every bit as horrific as if in our culture a person were to walk out onto a busy city sidewalk, pull down their pants, and defecate. Everyone would be shocked and horrified. As it happens, the San do say thank you. They do it whenever they're hunting, when they're making a decision to take a life. No animal is killed for food by the San without being thanked by them, both at the time of the hunt and later when a dance is done for the soul of the animal. And animals are only killed when there is a clear need for food. For those of us who grew up in modern civilization, it's difficult to imagine a life and culture where such fundamental things are simply taken for granted. When we stop behind a car at a red light, we don't open the door and run up to the car in front of us to thank them for being so considerate as to follow the basic rules of the road and stop for the red light. It's simply a given that everybody does that. No thanks are required. Thanking people for doing something implies they had a choice to do otherwise and did so out of a desire to be nice. But imagine a world where feeding another person is as much an automatic response as stopping at a red light. A world where a person who fails to feed or care for another is ostracized or punished, the way we give people tickets when they run red lights. Where the care of others is more important than even the care of yourself. Where the teaching all things that you should want others to do to you, do ye even so unto them, is actually practiced, not out of an effort, but as part of a daily routine, as the normal way things are, as the basic assumption of a society. That is San culture, the way of an older culture. A story of Chippewa, a storyteller of Chippewa and Cree ancestry told me that his people have a belief that if a person visits your home and you fail to share with them food and water so that they leave hungry or thirsty, and then the Creator decides to take them home at that time, they will arrive in the spirit world hungry and thirsty. He said the responsibility for that person's condition in the world is yours, because you were the last person he met and you had an opportunity to feed him. So we have an obligation to feed and give water and shelter and whatever else a person may need whenever they come into our village or our home. In our younger culture, we value productivity and individual possession. In their older culture, they value community. Most modern people find it difficult or impossible to imagine a world where community is more important than possessions. Yet this is how about 1% of the world's population still lives, and how all of your and my ancestors lived for hundreds of thousands of years. In 1997, a group of 13 researchers released a study in which they quantified the value of all the environments on the planet, from measuring the size of the Louisiana shrimp harvest to how much people were willing to pay for access to a lake, coral reef, or other natural attraction. They concluded that the planet's natural areas were worth about $33 trillion. And then from there, I go on to talk about how that's a crazy way to value anything. And we need to be, revisiting these ancient culture values. The book is The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and super pleased to have with us on the line Jessica Jackson, the National Director and co-founder of #Cut50, along with Van Jones, a former death row attorney, the mayor of Mill City, California. The website is cut50.org, cut50.org, and you can tweet her at @cut_50 or at Jessie Michelle. Jessica Jackson, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me on.
Great for having. I'm very pleased to have you with us. Sorry about that. I'm looking at your website here, and our mission and work. Cut50 is a national bipartisan initiative to safely and smartly reduce our incarcerated population by 50% over the next 10 years. Is that? I'm assuming that's an accurate characterization of what you're doing.
Absolutely, that is what we're doing, and we are working both on the federal and the state level. Tomorrow we kick off our state work with the Day of Empathy.
So tell us about that.
So Day of Empathy is 50 different events happening in 50 different states. We're working with local organizations in each state to promote the idea of empathy and to meet with state legislators and tell them stories of those who have been directly impacted by the criminal justice system, whether it's somebody who's been incarcerated, somebody who's lost a loved one to crime, somebody who's a crime survivor themselves, and even law enforcement. We're going to be opening up the heart space in these legislators so that they can open up their headspace and find solutions.
Many people would argue, I'm probably among them, that much of the distortion of our criminal justice marketplace, for lack of a better word, has come about as a consequence of for-profit prisons, that they are lobbying for stronger and harsher sentencing, for 3 strikes and you're out laws, for less judicial oversight, for stronger drug laws, anything that's going to drive up the population in their prisons. And President Obama had made the official federal policy to redirect people away from for-profit prisons and to stop contracting with for-profit prisons. Donald Trump has changed that, a 180 reversal. The Republican mantra seems to be if government is doing anything at all that could be done by a for-profit corporation and make, some billionaire or an investor rich, then that should be what we do, even if the consequence of that is a lot more people end up in prison. How can you be bipartisan when you've got an entire political party that's basically dedicated to the opposite of your philosophic goal?
Well, listen, two things. One, let's broaden this. Let's not just talk about private prisons. What folks don't realize, this is also public prisons. There are a lot of companies out there that are making money off of your loved ones, your neighbors, your friends being incarcerated in state prisons. You look at a company like Aramark that's providing the food, or Global Tellink that's gouging prisoners and their families from being able to have telephone communications. You look at a company like JPay that allows people to put money on other people's books, or there's even a private industry of products that people can purchase for loved ones who are incarcerated, radios, TVs, the like, that are marking up those prices substantially so that they're making money off of people being incarcerated. So when we talk about the incarceration industry, it's not just private prisons. They're a huge problem, but it's also our public prisons. And we have to factor in that a lot of that $80 billion a year that goes to incarcerating people is going to those companies. When it comes to working with Republicans, listen, we've got a president and an administration right now that is actually out of step with their own party. You look at folks like Paul Ryan, John Boehner before he left, Newt Gingrich, Grover Norquist. They've all been advocating, even the Koch brothers, they've all been advocating for smart on crime, not these one-size-fits-all tough on crime policies. So that's how we're staying bipartisan. There are a lot of folks within his party who aren't happy about some of the comments he's making, especially when it comes to civil asset forfeiture, or going after folks for simply smoking marijuana. They're not happy with that because they know those are not solutions to ending mass incarceration and more importantly, to making our streets safer.
But they do generate more profit for the industries that have sprung up around this stuff. What your name is Cut50. Cut50.org is the website. CUT50. What does that mean?
Cut50 is indicating to you that we're looking for transformative solutions. At the time that Van and I launched Cut50, we were a little disappointed to see that a lot of the celebrations taking place in the field were people celebrating, cutting the growth of prisons by 2%. We wanted to do something big. We wanted to find solutions that get people out of prison. Now, I'll be honest with you, I wanted Cut 99. It just wasn't as catchy. But Cut 50 tells you, look, we're looking for some transformative solutions in the next 10 years. We believe that half these people or more should be at home in their communities, learning how to be productive citizens, and that our justice system should be healing the problems by addressing the underlying reasons people are committing crime, not just shoving them in a box and throwing away the keys.
So it's as you say on your website, cutting the prison population by 50% over the next decade.
Yes.
What for people who are concerned about this, for people for whom this is an issue, and I think that it touches all of us in one way or another. What can they do?
Well, it starts tomorrow. Come out, join us with Day of Empathy. Like I said, we're bringing together some really unlikely groups in each of the states. So go to our website for that. That's dayofempathy.org. You'll see a big map on there with little red arrows in all of the states where you can click and figure out how you can plug in to your Day of Empathy. We've got folks in Mississippi, where I am right now. We're going to have about 400 social workers up at the Capitol talking to state legislators about the impact of the criminal justice system on juveniles who are put in adult facilities. We have Raise the Age activities going on in New York, Connecticut, and Texas. We've got really cool stuff going on in New Jersey featuring an art show made by juvenile lifers. We've got people in Atlanta, every state, California. They're bringing together 17 murder victim families with law enforcement and with people who have been incarcerated themselves. There's going to be some very powerful conversations going on with the legislators about the fact that, crime hurts and justice should heal, and our current system is not accomplishing that.
Yeah, very, very well said. Jessica Jackson, the national director and co-founder, along with Van Jones, of Cut 50, former death row attorney, mayor of Mill City, California. What a resume. Thanks so much, Jessica, for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Good talking with you. And you can tweet her at JessYMichele or at cut_50. We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be right back with your calls, my thoughts, and some more of the news of the day. And welcome back. Judy in Lakeport, California. Hey, Judy, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. First, I want to thank you for being there for us. And, I don't know what we'd do without you. But anyway, what I would like to talk about today is a perspective. And maybe it could be a subject for you for a new book. It's about the corporate news. I really feel that it's a strange kind of irony has happened here since Donald Trump turned against the media. They actually created the Trump followers. And, I'm sure you recall after 9/11 how the corporate news and George W. Bush Jr. started to control the media, and nobody saw how many body bags were coming back, et cetera, et cetera. Yep. So it's a strange, strange thing that's happened here. I mean, the corporate news kept the American public in total ignorance, kept them angry, kept them scared. And here we have Donald Trump. And I really feel that this could be a subject of a wonderful book for people.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Trump and the media. And in fact, it probably, there's probably half a dozen people writing those books right now, if not more. But excellent point, Judy. Excellent point. Thank you very much for the call. Adam in Eureka, California. Hey, Adam, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. First of all, love your book, Walking Your Blues Away. But
thank you.
I wanted to kind of change the subject in maybe a younger demographic, but a lot of my friends are both Republican and Democrat, and I've seen a lot of videos and information from the right-wing side lately talking about a Muslim uprising in Europe. I had a video sent to me on Facebook that had this girl talking about the Paris attacks and how it's traumatized their city. Mm-hmm. And then also a video from another friend of mine who lives in Scandinavia, and he had this guy that looked like the V from Vendetta guy with the mask, and he was talking shadowy about Hillary and the shadow government and the Muslim uprising. And my main question is, first of all, is this at all real? I'm no idiot. I listen to both sides. I'm actually a Green Party person. But I can't imagine that it's happening and we don't know about it, but they're convinced that there's a Muslim uprising.
Yeah. There are a few crazies. There's no doubt about that. I mean, we've seen them both here in the United States and in Europe. This is why Donald Trump's national security advisor, as I recall, McMaster is the guy's name. His new, whatever the guy's title is, has come right out and said out loud that Donald Trump should not use the phrase radical Muslim terrorist or radical Islamic terrorist. Because it's the same thing. It's like here in the United States, you get some right-wing Christian whack job who goes out and kills a bunch of people, right? Whether it's an abortion doctor or whether it's just killing people. Oh, you had this, the guy a couple of days ago who shot two Indian Americans and killed one of them and yelled, go back to your country. If we called him a radical Christian terrorist, Christians across America would say, wait a minute, that's not us. And if you believe that's us, you must be anti-Christian. And that's why you don't say radical Islamic terrorist. But these guys, on the right, all they have to sell, Adam, is fear. And so they're going to try and freak you out and make you afraid as much as they can. We'll be back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Donna in Minneapolis. Hey, Donna, what's on your mind today?
Hey, I'm in an elevator with 3 or 4 people, so this will be interesting.
Do you want me to put you on hold and come back to you in a minute?
Could you?
Okay, yeah, let me do that and make it easier for you. Leon in Crete, Illinois, listening on WCPT. Hey, Leon, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hi, Tom. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. How are you, Leon?
Oh, okay. I was listening to the guy talking about letting people have concealed carry on college campuses and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one argument I never hear anybody make. And I realized that when they started in Illinois here to have concealed carry is, in my opinion, the reason why people want to carry guns is because they're scared. They're scared to walk out of the house. They're scared of everything and everybody all day long. Right. And if somebody comes up and starts shooting, they're not going to take a gun and shoot back. They run and hide because they're scared anyways.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
They're scared.
I'm pretty sure in Denver that they had concealed carry when the guy opened fire in the movie theater.
Yes.
But nobody shot back. They ran and hid.
Right. Well, it was just the reality is it's just chaos. I mean, there were 2 people who were carrying weapons, maybe 3, when Gabby Giffords was shot, and they were interviewed afterwards. Why didn't you shoot the guy? And they were like, there were so many people. I couldn't get a clean shot. If I had gone just a couple inches the wrong direction, I would have killed other people. It's just it's not as simple. It's not like a John Wayne movie, the way that these gun nuts want to portray it. I shouldn't even say gun nuts. It's really the gun manufacturers who are manufacturing and peddling this kind of propaganda.
Yeah, and it's like I heard you say too. That the police are saying that when there's an incident, and then all of a sudden all these other people are pulling out guns, they don't know who the bad guy is.
Yeah, exactly, and that's a serious and legitimate problem. And
when they started the concealed carry here in Illinois, I'm like you. I'm not an NRA member, but I like to go target shooting here and there.
Mm-hmm.
And when they started concealed carry, somebody was asking me if I was going to get the concealed carry permit. And I thought about it, and I thought, well, you know what? That's not how I was raised. I don't walk around being afraid of everything and everybody all the time. I just don't feel the need for it.
But here's the thing, Leon. If you were to watch Fox News for 5 or 6 hours a day for a week, you'd start being afraid.
That's true, too.
I'm not exaggerating. There's an amazing movie out called The Brainwashing of My Dad, where this young woman actually chronicles. She's a videographer, and she chronicles her father discovering Fox News, starting to watch it, starting to actually drink the Kool-Aid, getting obsessed with it, and turning into a raging right-wing fear freak, to paraphrase you.
Yeah. I think I read somewhere that they found this out in with the propaganda in Germany in World War II that fear and anxiety is addicting. And that's what they went for.
Sure, adrenaline. People become adrenaline junkies.
These guys don't realize that if somebody's going to come up and rob you or something, they come up in your blind spot out of the dark. They're not hiding in the corner and say, hey, I'm over here, get out your concealed carry gun to protect yourself.
Right.
They come out where you can't see them and it's too late. They'll just steal your gun too,
Yep. And in fact, one of the way, an awful lot of the guns that are circulating in the illegal market were stolen from legal gun owners. Most of them through break-ins, but, some of them just walking up to people and taking their guns off them. You're absolutely right. Leon, I got to move along, but thank you for the call, and thanks for listening to WCPT. Donna in Minneapolis, listening on AM 950. Donna, are you out of the elevator now?
I am, Tom. Thanks so much. You're so great. First of all, I'm really looking forward to seeing you here in Minneapolis at the Blue Ball, so that's really exciting.
I'm looking forward to that, too.
Yeah, so I'll see you in the VP area. What I wanted to talk about today is, as a Jew, what's been happening with the cemeteries. To answer the question from your caller before in terms of the Muslim uprising, actually what's happening is that the white supremacists are really coming out in force now. And I can't imagine how Trump's daughter and son-in-law, and he even has a grandson that's being raised Jewish. And I'm wondering at what point will he start taking his cue from his son-in-law and his daughter and start speaking up and push Bannon aside, because this has to shift. Otherwise, we're going to see a lot more. And the other thing I wanted to say is that I've been speaking to some liberals, And they're having a hard time because of their views on Israel and the Palestinian issue, kind of stepping behind me, but not from the perspective of the white supremacists, but saying, okay, I understand why they're doing this. And that was kind of shocking to me, that everything is being conflated. You know, I'm on...
I don't think any of these white supremacists are running around, you know, there have been also 50 bomb threats phoned into synagogues just in the last 2 weeks.
Exactly.
I don't think that any of those people are saying, I'm doing this because I empathize with the Palestinians. I think that they're doing it because they're watching, you know, the right-wing hate media, and they're convinced that there's a Jewish plot to control the world, and all the Jewish bankers, and what about all those guys at Goldman Sachs with Jewish-sounding names, blah blah blah. I mean, you know the drill, right?
Right. No, I'm saying that that my liberal friends are starting to conflate the two issues and saying maybe that's why. And I'm
well, they're uninformed.
parroting what you're saying. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
What you are looking at is white Christian supremacy, and that's, you know, in a nutshell. And frankly, white Christian terrorism, radical Christian extremists. And they have radical Christian extremists in this country have killed twice as many people as radical Muslim extremists have in the last 10 years. So it's like, and to the best of my knowledge, nobody has been killed by radical Jewish extremists. I mean, that kind of faded out with the creation of the state of Israel. You know.
Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Donna. It's a very real issue. Rudy in Atlanta. Hey, Rudy, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, thank you so much for taking my call. I wanted to say thank you for being who you are.
Well, thank you, Rudy.
I called about probably a year ago, but I said it then, and I still say it now. White America is in a crossroads, and this thing called white supremacy, I call it a cancer.
I agree.
And see, when you have the news consolidation set up the way it is, this is causing white America harm.
Yep.
Now, and what I mean by this is, like you just told the lady or the gentleman, when you have the news that's just bashing every other group, and people don't have another perspective of coming from other minority groups of people, that makes you ignorant. It's not your fault, but it makes you ignorant.
Yep.
And this is what I see. I for some reason, I just don't see how white America everyone marches out for guns.
Yeah.
And I always come back to this. You putting yourselves in a box, and it's going to be such a box that I don't care what kind of gun you have. We are going to be in a social. You're going to be in a social warfare, and what I mean by socially, people are not going to want to deal with you because of the lies.
No, it's getting there already. Rudy, I'm sorry we're running out of time, but your points are brilliant, very well taken. Thank you very much for the call, and thanks for listening to SiriusXM. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
28 minutes past the hour, back with more of your calls, my thoughts, and the news of the day right after this. The Philippine war on drugs. Rodrigo Duterte launched a Filipino version of Richard Nixon's war on drugs. Now, you'll recall Richard Nixon's war on drugs, John Ehrlichman told us, the reason for it was that they wanted to bust up the hippies and they wanted to bust up the civil rights movement, essentially. And so they made heroin and pot super illegal. And, you know, whether they planted it on people or people were using it, they just went after that. Well, this war on drugs in the Philippines is now 7 weeks old. This is as of the 23rd, 3 days ago. 7 weeks old, 1,900 people have died. 1,900 people have died. You know, over 100,000 Mexicans have died just on our border in the Mexican war on drugs. Millions of Americans have had their lives ruined by the war on drugs in this country since Richard Nixon launched it in the late 1960s, early 1970s. Millions of people. And I would say probably between tens and hundreds of thousands of people have died as a result of the war on drugs. This is crazy. Portugal had the third highest drug addiction rate in Europe. Now that includes, Europe these days now includes a number of very, very, the former Soviet states that are very, very poor countries where they have, that are closer, that are farther south and east and closer to the principal source of heroin these days, and opium, which is Afghanistan. And so there's, a couple of countries that had higher drug addiction rates, but among the developed countries of Europe, the so-called Western European nations, Western and Northern European nations, Portugal was number one in terms of drug addiction, and particularly heroin, and new infections of HIV and Hep C, which come along with, sharing needles. So Portugal decriminalized all drugs. They did the exact opposite of what the Philippines did 8 weeks ago when their new president came in. They did the exact opposite. They decriminalized all drugs. And this was 14 years ago, in 2002. And now they have one of, if not the lowest drug addiction rates in all of Western Europe, arguably probably all of Europe. And the rates of new HIV and Hep C infections have just collapsed. And organized crime in Portugal, at least that part of organized crime that was involved in the drug trade, it broke their back. They're destroyed. They're gone. Toast. We're watching in real time this terrible mistake in the Philippines. 1,900 people killed in the first 7 weeks in the so-called war on drugs. And whereas in Portugal, the Portuguese government, first of all, everybody in Portugal has free health care. So they stopped treating drug addiction as a crime, started treating it as a medical issue. And drug addicts are now they can get their drugs, and they can get clean syringes if they're using injectable drugs. And we're talking all drugs. LSD, cocaine, heroin, you name it. But the big ones, of course, are heroin and pot. But they decriminalized everything and had this really, really good result. Whereas here in the United States, there was just a story, I think it was Indiana, might have been Ohio, somewhere in the Midwest, where something like 18 people had died over the course of a day or two because a new batch of heroin arrived and it had been cut with fentanyl or one of these other pharmaceutical drugs that are actually far more potent than heroin. Yes, heroin is not the most potent or addictive opioid drug. There are a number of prescription drugs that are more powerful than heroin. And, in many parts of the world, heroin is used I believe, as a pharmaceutical. It's dihydromorphine, I think is the chemical name for it. And it's just, heroin is just morphine that has had, a slight change to its molecular structure that makes it a little bit more potent than morphine, or arguably a lot more potent than morphine. But this is, it's simple lessons for us, how to figure this stuff out. It's just simple lessons. But there's so much money to be made here in the United States. Oh, and these people who are dying in the United States because they're getting heroin that's laced with, that's been cut with pharmaceuticals. That's because the heroin is illegal, right? You're not going to end heroin addiction by outlawing it, particularly when you consider that it is, by and large, a medical problem. Addiction is a medical problem. whether it's addiction to caffeine, to nicotine, to heroin, I mean, you name it, alcohol. These are medical problems that should be treated as medical problems.
Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Boy, what an amazing day. Jim in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind today?
Hey, what's going on?
I'm here.
Hey, I just wanted to express my viewpoint as a Democrat. I'm more of a central person. I'm not very liberal. I'm not very progressive. That's what I am. I conceal carry, and there's only one specific reason why I do. When I'm going out of town, I conceal carry. But when I'm just out and about in my town, I'm not going to conceal carry. Just that simple. I'm not. The reason why I carry and conceal is to protect my family, and that's it. I don't understand why this is such a major problem.
Well, it's a major problem because the United States loses between 30 and 50,000 people a year to gun violence, way out of proportion to any other country in the world. It's a major problem because when you put a gun into a home, you increase by 500% the probability of suicide in that home, and by well over 100% the probability of homicide. It's a problem because you're far more likely to have that gun be used by one of your children to kill or maim someone than to ever defend your family with it.
Yeah, but that's presuming I'm irresponsible and I'm not.
No, it's not. It's presuming that crap happens.
A lockbox and my ammo is elsewhere.
Yeah.
That's assuming that I'm irresponsible, and I'm not.
Well, I congratulate you, Jim, on being a more rational gun owner, and I'm not saying that people shouldn't own guns. I've said on this program many times, I enjoy target shooting, and skeet shooting. I think that they're great fun. And one of my brothers is an enthusiastic gun owner, as is his wife. And Louise and I have gone target shooting, with them regularly and frequently. I'm not opposed to guns. What people in America have to get is that this experiment with gun libertarianism, essentially, in this country, has led to the United States being an outlier against every other developed country in the world. They have a fraction. I mean, we're talking like, single-digit percentage on a population for population basis of the gun deaths that we have. And then you look at countries like Switzerland and Canada, where they've got relatively the same number of guns per people that we have, and they have much lower violence. Why? Because the majority of those are actually hunting rifles, or in the case of Switzerland, the military rifles, but those are kept in armories by and large. But, they're hunting rifles rather than
pistols. You realize the more that the media and the news paint this with a broad brush is pushing me more to the right of me being centered than it is to the left. Because,
if this is going to make you vote for a Republican, Jim, you have my sympathies. Good luck.
Just like me.
Yeah, okay. All right. Jim, thanks for the call. Sean in North Platte, Nebraska. Hey, Sean, what's up?
Yeah, long-time listener of your show, big fan of yours for nearly 7 years.
Thank you, Sean.
I have a real bad bipolar disorder and a borderline personality, and I just believe that, I am one person who has no business with a gun, and I'll bet you it'd be really easy for me to get one even with an FBI NICS background check.
Yeah.
I think we need tougher gun laws.
Okay. Sean, thank you for sharing your story with us. I appreciate the call. Hannah in Overland Park, Kansas. Hey, Hannah, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I've just got 2 bones to pick real quick with some of my Kansas congressmen.
Okay.
So I just came from a gathering at Senator Roberts' office. His office is inside of a bank, and we had a
if I may interrupt you, Hannah, is this your U.S. senator or your state senator?
U.S. Senator Pat Roberts.
Oh, Pat Roberts. Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't recognize the name right off. Okay, go continue.
Not a problem. So we had a guy who comes pretty much every week with our group that goes out. He's a former Marine. He's disabled. And he went today to park in a handicapped spot in front of the bank, and they threatened to tow his car because he wasn't a customer of the bank. So, you know, I'm a military spouse. I know a lot of people in the military, and that is just wrong and offensive on so many levels.
Mm-hmm.
The other gripe I got to pick, I live 20 minutes from the shooting that happened in Olathe the other day, 15 minutes the other way from the Jewish Community Center that happened in Overland Park, April 2014, I believe. Apparently, I did not find this out until, I believe, yesterday, but Representative Kevin Yoder, who represents this area, he sent out a campaign flyer that basically had what you would presume an ISIS member with a giant machine gun on it saying we need to protect our neighborhood. While I commend him for having a moment of silence on the floor and coming to speak at a vigil for the victims the other night of the Olathe shooting, what he did sending that flyer out, he needs to take responsibility for, you know, these kind of violent things that are happening in his district.
Yeah.
So those are my 2 bones to pick.
And for vilifying Muslims, I'm guessing the guy's picture who was holding the machine gun, who was, you know, the Muslim terrorist, was not a European white guy, even though there are a lot of white Muslims.
White gentlemen like the 2 shootings that happened here in the last couple of years.
Right. There you go. Anna, thanks for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
I appreciate the call. Benjamin in Madison, Mississippi. Hey, Benjamin, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, Tom, just a couple of things. One of the things, they're sort of related, but I hope your people are not saying that there is a Muslim ban in this country, because it is not a ban on Muslim. It's just from 7 countries, and the 3 largest countries in the world where Muslims are, those people are free to come back and forth. And I just wanted to kind of get that out there. But the other thing I was calling about, there has not been any arrest in the cemetery desecrations, has there? Any
Rest, did you say?
Arrest.
Oh, arrests. I don't know. I don't believe so.
Yeah, well, this is sort of the thing. I get the feeling you're doing sort of the same thing that Fox does as far as putting fear into people. Now, you blame it on...
Benjamin, thanks a lot for the call. That's all you have to do to get dumped, is to compare me with Fox. Howard in Coriopolis, Pennsylvania. Hey, Howard, what's on your mind?
I think high priority, Tom, the community that I live in is heavily Republican.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking to myself, a lot of them are senior citizens, and if they knew the threat to Medicare and Social Security, a lot of them would no longer stay Republican.
Yeah. Well, and that information is spreading rapidly as Paul Ryan tries to roll out a budget that slashes both Medicare and Social Security. And Donald Trump is trying to say, oh, wait a minute, I promised I wouldn't take them away from you. And I'm really wondering how that one's going to play out.
Yeah. You know, I'd like to walk up the street and knock on the door, but people today are hesitant to even answer the door. People just don't want, you know, it's hard to communicate.
Yeah.
People lock themselves in. They don't want to even answer the door.
Yeah.
But you can't blame
So
them.
you're having a hard time reaching out to your Republican neighbors? Is that the point, Howard?
Yeah, where I live, yeah.
Wow.
They just
Is it that they don't want to hear what you have to say, or that they're afraid to answer the door?
Yeah, it's part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I believe that if we could communicate this message about the threat, a lot of Republicans would become Democrats.
Oh, yeah. And it's not just the threat to Social Security and Medicare. I mean, on issue after issue after issue, and the Progressive Change Campaign Committee did some really great polling on this a year or two ago, on virtually, I mean, you take the DNC's platform that Hillary Clinton ran on, or take, you know, Bernie's speech and break it down to basically the 38 points that he was, you know, presenting. The vast majority, well over 50% of all Americans agree with all of those points. And, you know, at least 3/4 of them are agreed with by more than half of Republicans. It's just that, you've got, you've got these media bubbles that people are living inside of, whether it's right-wing hate radio or whether it's Fox so-called news or whether it's like Breitbart, with their black crime section, which they, gracefully got rid of when they moved into the White House. But, this is, it's selling fear and loathing. I mean, it's just no other way to describe it other than that. And so you end up with people who are convinced that they need to be afraid. They're not sure exactly what, other than maybe people who don't look quite like me. In other words, they're not white people. And when in fact, the majority of people who have been killed in this country since 9/11 have been killed by white Christian terrorists, not by any person of color or any other religion. It's very, very simple. Howard, thanks for the call. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And the news is out that Trump is trying to restore his Muslim ban, as Rudy Giuliani refers to it. That's interesting. Stick around. And welcome back. Jane in Fallbrook, California. Hey, Jane, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
What's on my mind is the recent decision for the Democratic Party to accept corporation financing and contributions. I believe that one of the major problems with our democracy today is the way our campaigns are financed, because the people are not making the decisions. The corporations and the people who have all that money in those corporations are making the decisions. And my thought is that maybe it's, after 60 years of being a Democrat, maybe it's time for me to find a new party. But, what chance does the new party have of being elected? I was really impressed with Bernie Sanders and his ability to not take corporation contributions and to get the kind of response he got from the American people in his campaign.
Yep.
And maybe if people like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and others created a new party without the pressure of the corporations behind them, we might have a chance to get our democracy back.
In theory, Jane, but in practice, if they created a third party, they would have no national infrastructure. They would have no recognition by the television networks, or very little. They would not be able to participate in the presidential debates unless they could, demonstrate 15% support in the polls. There are all these institutional barriers that were frankly created by the Republican and Democratic Party. Yeah. There are all these institutional barriers to entrance by a third party, which is why I agree with Bernie in his decision to get inside the Democratic Party and disrupt it and take it over, as opposed to trying to create an entirely, separate third party on the outside. And if anybody could have created a third party, it would have been Bernie. He was an independent. He was never a Democrat. So, he wouldn't even have to resign from his party or anything. He'd just say, okay, I'm creating a new party, or I'm going to jump on a party that, already exists, that, I forget the name of Jesse Ventura's party. What was it? Brain fart here. But in any case, the old party that, has been, there's some party structures kicking around. The Independence Party. Thank you, Troy. And, but I just don't see any viable option right now other than taking over the Democratic Party. And I think the good news is that, we got within 20 votes or so of Keith Ellison, basically the Bernie wing, literally taking over the party. And the only thing that pushed back against it was Barack Obama, President Obama, calling delegates and lobbying them to vote for Tom Perez. And, I know. That's problematic, to say the least. But, we're getting closer and closer, and that's a good thing. And it's happening all over the country, and progressives are running for office and winning. And the seats that in the last election were won the biggest were, Peters in Michigan, run by people who basically ran on a Bernie platform saying, I'm an unabashed progressive, and picking up House seats. And, the guy, Doug Applegate, the guy who was within 1,600 votes of taking down Darrell Issa, who's not only the richest man in the House of Representatives, but also one of the most powerful and thought he had the safest seat. He nearly lost. They had to do a recount. So I'm actually very optimistic about the future of both the Democratic Party and the progressive movement. I think we're going to see some good stuff coming. So, Jane, you didn't ask for my advice, but my unsolicited advice is, let's stick around and make this thing work. Jane, thanks so much for the call. We'll be back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Cindy in Cascade Locks, Oregon. Hey, Cindy, what's on your mind today?
Well, I wanted to thank you for staying focused on important issues of wealth inequality and just the important issues that confront Americans today. And number two, I wanted to put a shout out to people that are listening out there to keep in mind that the only ones being paid for being at a town hall are politicians, and they're the ones that are being paid to be there, and they need to be there.
Yep.
And then the third thing is I have a little story if you have time.
Okay.
And that is my husband recently was traveling cross country, and he stopped at a little coffee shop, hopped out of his van, got inside, and was going to just get some coffee and donuts, and a fellow and his wife were in there. And as he came around the corner with his coffee, the guy said, "Oh, I thought maybe you were a terrorist," just because my husband has a big beard. And my husband thought that was hilarious. He kind of chuckled, and he said, "Boo." And the guy acted like he was going to pull a gun on him. I mean, he freaked out.
Whoa.
And I just thought, that is just the kind of state we're in right now.
Yeah.
Like,
Was that in the United
so
States
afraid.
or in a foreign country?
You're right. He was here in the United States.
Wow. Yeah. See, this is the thing. There's so much fear across the country, and fear is so easy to crank up, and so hard to deal with the consequences of. And you get fearful people, and they end up, carrying weapons, and then, one of them might have shot your husband. Cindy, thank you for the call. It's very concerning. Sharon in Prince Frederick, Maryland. Hey, Sharon, what's on your mind today?
I like to listen to you, but today I'm listening to the gentleman talking about having the concealed carry and to protect his family. And my husband and I are both former military, and we have weapons in our house. And we always tell people because we like to shoot. But what we don't have it for is protection. Because once I go down at night, which is when I'm most apt to be in the house, chances are if someone is breaking into my house, I'm not going to wake up, get my key that unlocks the trigger guard, and then go find where we keep the bullets, which is completely separate from where the gun is. Because we don't want to be killed by our own weapons. But the other part is that we have a very good security system, because you know what that will notify in case someone is breaking into my house and my husband is out of town. It'll notify the police that I'm in distress.
Right.
Because
and that's their job.
Right. I think that waking up and thinking that you're going to all of a sudden become a braver person that you were 5 seconds ago when you were in a sound sleep is not true. And it's like you said, though, they have ingrained so much fear in people that I guess we all think that if we have a weapon strapped to us, we feel better.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, it can't be. If police are afraid and shooting at random because of their imagined fear, what do we think that the general public who's strapped is going to, how they respond to their imagined fear, which has been, really hyped up?
Yep.
So I just don't understand. But I do believe that everyone, if there's nothing that prevents you from having a weapon, should have the right to have a weapon within reason. Like, I don't think you should have a bazooka in your front yard, a grenade launcher. I don't think you have a need for an automatic weapon, or in that case, chemical weapons, because I think that's our next big thing. We just don't know. We're so afraid anymore of everything and anything. Yeah. And I think it's all in our heads.
Yep. Very, very well said, Sharon. Thank you for a very rational discourse. That was brilliant. Thank you. Liz in League City, Texas. Hey, Liz, what's on your mind today?
Hi. Well, I just, you're talking about guns today, and as a resident of Texas, we are a little different kind of liberal. I'm very supportive of the Second Amendment. In fact, I don't know what the rules are on college campuses, but one of my children attends a university in Texas where you were allowed to rent a gun safe in your dorm if you were 21. And that's at Texas A&M University. I don't know what their rules are or what the law is. I don't own a gun, so I'm not really up on those.
Right.
But I do believe that, even though it is part of it is the Second Amendment, and we do need to support that it does come with some responsibility. And I'm a veteran teacher and on sabbatical right now, and I know that I've been through active shooter training, and I've also been in a situation with an active shooter, and everybody responds differently. And I believe that should be part of getting a gun license. I don't think you should. I think it should be just as hard or harder to get a gun license as it is to get a driver's license.
Agreed.
And it's not in my state. And I just want to thank you so much for being a voice of reason out there, because I live in a heavy Tea Party district and, one of the few lone liberals in my area. And it's nice to hear that I'm not the only one out there.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you, Liz. And thanks for listening to us on SiriusXM's Progress Channel. JR in Somerset, Kentucky. Hey, JR, what's up?
Hey, thank you for taking my call. I was wanting to talk. You were talking a little earlier about concealed weapons, and I'm a Purple Heart veteran. And I remember when I first came back, there was the whole Obama scare. He was going to take away your weapons, and I personally was taking weapons away from me because I was dealing with some things, PTSD and bipolar disorder. But after a while, I decided I was going to go ahead and get something, because if all these crazy people are going to have weapons, then I want to have a weapon and protect myself. I mean, I'm not scared of Obama taking my guns, but I'm just saying it creates this vicious cycle. It's like and then just the ease to get a weapon. I mean, I went down to the hardware store and within 5 minutes got a weapon. And I mean, technically, I don't think I should own one, but again, part of that cycle of fear. So, what do you do?
Yeah. Well, what are you going to do, JR?
Well, I mean, I went through the concealed weapons class. I keep it, separate. I learned all about weapons while I was in the military.
Right. But
I'm just saying, there's some people who don't have that conscious of okay, well, I might have this weakness or I need to do this. But, it's just, and then they sign the thing, saying that mentally ill people can have weapons. I mean, it's just, I just think it's way too easy. Me personally, I think that I'm going to manage, but I mean, there's people who don't have that cognizance,
Yep.
And it's scary.
And don't have the training and don't have the experience. Yeah, excellent points. JR, thank you for the call. I wish you the very best. Bringing a weapon into your home. People have to, Americans need to realize this. If you have a weapon in your home, you've doubled the suicide risk in your home. Actually, I think it's a 500% increase in suicide rate. And you've radically increased the probability that a child is going to get hurt or killed in your home. I mean, this is serious stuff. And people who understand that do things like having gun safes and keeping your bullets separate from, keeping your ammunition separate from your weapon and all that sort of thing. But that's not the way it's typically played out, which is why we have these horrible statistics in this country. Anyhow, we're out of time for the day. Thanks so much for being with us. We'll be back tomorrow and in all probability be talking about whatever it is Trump talks about tonight. So we'll see you then. And in the meantime, don't forget, democracy requires you. Tag you're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates. helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeats.com.